Let's go.
It's the Division II HBCU Roundup on HBCU Pulse Radio. Small HBCUs matter too.
Let's go.
It's the Division II HBCU Roundup on HBCU Pulse Radio. Welcome back.
In 4, 3, 2, 1.
To HBCU Pulse Radio, the heart of HBCU culture.
What's going on, everybody? This is Randall Barnes, the founder of HBCU Pulse and the host of HBCU Pulse Radio, in the building for another special edition of the show on today, where we are currently live. I see that there are 7 people watching right now. That is amazing. What's going on to the 7 people that are watching, and also the folks that are going to be watching right after this stream is over. It is the end of Thanksgiving break. It hit me last night that, man, it's back to work. But I mean, this is my job. So, Pulse is my job, so self-employed, but it's still work, and you always love a break. But I hope all is well. We did not do a show on last week. We didn't do the regular HBCU Pulse Radio show, nor that we do a SIAC space, but we're going to make up for it. The SIAC season is officially over. Wingate did beat Benedict College 23-6 on yesterday, but it's nothing but flowers for Benedict. They had an amazing season. They finished the regular season 11-0, and they ended the season 11-1. An amazing, just dominant run through the SIAC, and I'm proud of them. A lot of, interesting storylines to talk about on tonight. There's been a lot of chatter in Morehouse Twitter spaces and Morehouse spaces of media that are saying that Morehouse is closing in or might be getting Ray Lewis. There's no confirmed reports, nor are we reporting, but that's the chatter that's been going on in these internet streets. So, do y'all think that Ray Lewis would go to Morehouse? I see William Taggart is out there. He was coaching down there. I believe it was one of the Florida schools? I think UCF or one of the schools. I'm not too sure. I will go check that. But he's a free agent now. He got fired. So, I mean, maybe he goes to Morehouse. Who knows? I mean, I think that that's going to be a very interesting, very hot job, especially as, these Power Fives are trying to get Deion Sanders up out of Jackson State. So we're looking to see who's the next big splashy hire that's going to be going on in the HBCU space So let's see what's going on. So we're about to go on and switch over to Twitter Spaces. Make sure to follow at D2HBCU Football, because that's where the spaces will be if you ever want to talk or comment on this space. So I want you to definitely stay tuned for that. And we're going to see if it's starting, because I got to check my computer. I'm on Windows right now. It's not started yet. So let's talk about what happened in that Wingate game on yesterday really quickly. I'm going to go in depth more when we do HBCU Pulse Radio this weekend. But let's talk about what happened in the Wingate game. So first and foremost, I want to say congratulations to Wingate University. They are headed to the quarterfinals for the first time in their school's history. They have the number 4 or number 3 ranked defense in Division II. And, you know, they locked up several HBCUs. You know, they played Fayetteville State, they played Shaw, they played Virginia Union, they played Benedict, and they had an amazing season. And Delta State actually did not make, they didn't make it to the next round. University of West Florida, who won the D2 National Championship in 2019, they made it. So all props to them. And I know we have a few folks that attended Wingate, or they're alum of Wingate, or they're students at Wingate. A lot of them were tapping in and checking in on the preview that we did. But Wingate's defense is for real. That's one thing I can say really quickly before we truly get going. Wingate's defense is like that. They came into the year 9-2 on the year. They beat Shaw Fayetteville State to start the season. They beat number 22 ranked Lenore Ryan on October the 29th. They hold opponents, and this is before the playoffs started. They held opponents to 10.9 points per game, 68 yards rushing, 144 yards passing, only allowing 8 passing touchdowns and 5 rushing touchdowns going into the playoffs. So here's the thing. Stephen Gaither of HBCU Game Day, who was on the space a couple weeks ago, I appreciate him, and D2K Ferg coming on. They brought a lot of perspective, as they're both Winston-Salem State University alum and big fans and supporters of the CIAA. He said this in response to Amir Talib. I saw this on my Twitter, so I want to reference this. Amir Talib said Wingate's receivers are wide open on almost every go route. Benedict needs to switch up the pass coverage strategy and or communicate better before each snap. So Steven said, it's like they don't see a passing offense in the SIAC. And when he said that, I'm like, that is so true. Because all of really the SIAC and CIAA teams, if you want to be real, they're run-first offenses. I mean, if we want to really just keep it a buck, they're run-first offenses. So when we get into the playoffs and we play these other conferences, like, they light us up because we're not used to a pass offense. Like, out of the top offenses in D2 this year, only Virginia Union, who was ranked number 7, and Benedict, who were ranked number 13, cracked the top 50. And that's not conjecture. I did research. That is from the NCAA.com. We're talking about D2. I went to the D2 stats. I looked up top offenses. Yeah, Union number 7 and Benedict was number 13. So based on statistics, we're not even playing top offenses in our conferences because our conference isn't even ranking in the top 50, except for Benedict for the SIAC, and you have Virginia Union for the CIAA. And the thing about it is, when you look at Wingate's defense, Wingate is constructed to stop the run and put the pressure on the quarterbacks. When you got to pass, you have no space. It's so much pressure going on that quarterback ain't going to have a clean pocket. That's all they were doing to Eric Phoenix on yesterday. The game was live on HBC League Pass Plus. That's the home team. Listen, if you didn't check out the game and you want to see what went down, you definitely got to check out HBC League Pass Plus, because the whole entire game is going to be available on stream. And all you got to do is go and search Benedict, and it's going to come up, because it was a clinic on defense, because Eric Phoenix did the best he could. He put up, some good passing yards. It was almost 300 yards passing. They couldn't get anything on the ground. No Isaiah Scotland, who was a star. DeAndre Duhart, he's a star. They weren't able to do anything against that Wingate run defense, because that run defense is super duper dominant. And in the regular season, they were holding opponents, like I said, to 65 yards rushing. Stephen was right. And the thing is that we're not used to playing teams with that type of defense. And we're also not used to playing teams with that pass offense. like our Steven was saying, because Shaw Crocker, who was Wingate's starting quarterback, 14 of 29, 232 yards passing, 48% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. I thought the interception that Benedict got, I thought that was going to be a game changer. And he wasn't terribly efficient. He wasn't 1,000% picking apart Benedict, but he had a pretty good game considering he made some tough throws when Benedict was bringing pressure to him. Benedict in that fourth quarter, they were knocking him around and he was still getting the ball out. I'm like, whoa. Like that was just something I just really wasn't expecting, because it's like it was one, I'm like, I'm glad he's not injured. It was one play, I'm like, dude, this Crocker guy, he's like that. Like it's some good quarterbacks in D2 that folks are sleeping on. But the space is about to start up. I'm going to go on and hop in. You're going to hear me talking, and I'm going to get off the rest of my points during this. So we're going to really talk about it and chop it up in a second. So let's go on and hop on. Like I said, if you want to hop on and talk about what's happening, what's really going on, you can go to D2 HBCU Football's Twitter. And if you're listening to this live, you can hop on the Twitter Spaces and request to speak. So make sure to really stay tuned for that. But let's go on and get things started. You're listening to HBCU Pulse Radio. And right now, you're about to listen to me and D2 HBCU Football and Coach Thomas talk about the SIAC season in review and a little bit about Benedict versus Wingate. And it might be some Wingate fans hop on too, because they had a lot to say to D2 HBCU Football after our preview, because he said he was going to turn the TV off because Benedict should be up by 20. And they saw that video and they waited and they commented. So thank y'all Wingate fans for watching. But let's go on and hop in. And it looks like we're going to get things going in 1 second. But, hey, it looks like Brother Eric Phoenix is in. Brother Eric Phoenix is in here, man. So it looks like we're gonna hear from him. So we're going to get things. Okay, here we go.
D2.
What's going on, man?
No, I'm just checking in real quick, just trying to make sure my connection good.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too, because I'm actually on the road, so I'm trying to make sure that everything is a go, man. How was your Thanksgiving?
Man, it was pretty good, man. Got to eat with the fam. Got to see some people I didn't get to see in a minute. So yeah, man, everything was smooth, man. How was yours, man? How your family?
I can't complain. I'm actually going to see family now. I didn't make it up to the game. I actually was planning on making it, but man, I've been traveling so much these last couple of weeks, so it caught up with me. I needed to sit down for a second. I thought I might have had COVID, but I'm glad that it came back negative, because I was down for a little minute. But just good, man. I appreciate everybody that's coming in. Hold on, let me get rounded up.
Yeah, I made the trip up to Columbia, man. I took that 7-hour drive there. Took that 7-hour drive back, but I learned something yesterday. I learned not to drive during the day like that, especially going back.
Okay.
And it took me 9 hours to get home.
Glad, man. We got Eric Phoenix in here, and the man himself, the architect of that Benedict team and that historic Benedict run, to say the least. We also got the president of Edward Waters University in the building tonight. Glad about that. How you doing, Randall? How was your Thanksgiving?
Man, it was good. I enjoyed that break. We did the show that we did on Monday. But I told you offline, I took a break and I'm ready to get back to it. Man, like Wingate, they had smoke for you. We thought FAMU was going to have some smoke. Wingate had the smoke for you, man. What was going on?
Hold on. First of all, before y'all even get started talking to each other, how y'all gonna leave me off the podcast group y'all did? I gotta come at y'all about that first.
We go like I'm bringing you on. I told, because I hit you up like after the championship. I'm gonna have you on real soon. Like that was just like last minute thing, because when I saw FAMU didn't make it, then they were blaming Albany State. I'm like, I know it's Thanksgiving, but I can't stand for that. As a Fort Valley alum and like Albany State, that's our rival, but I ride for Albany State. I'm like, that's unfair. So I was like, man, I don't want to just go in and just be talking and I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm like, I want to get, D2 HBCU football because he got the historical fact, but we got you coming. We're going to have you on real soon.
Hello. Okay.
We here.
Had to make sure I had to get back for it.
Go ahead, D2. Go ahead,
Man,
man.
but I kind of cut out people calling me, but I appreciate everybody for joining. I hope everybody had a blessed and wonderful Thanksgiving. Hope everything is going your way as we enter into this season, this holiday season. And I just want to first stop and just say I appreciate everybody for rocking with us. Just starting this, Randall and Coach Thomas, they came on. I'm really appreciative to them. They add so much insight and perspective, and we're going to keep doing this until we get it right, I guess. But I'm really appreciative to you all too for being open to this idea and coming on board, and just really grateful. Grateful for life. Grateful for the SIAC. Regardless to our playoffs, all that. I am a firm believer that we have quality schools. We have great schools. We got great coaches, and we have great teams, and we play a great brand of football in this conference. We are gonna break down some things tonight. Talk about some things that's maybe kind of hard to swallow because there are some things that we have to address, and who better to address them than people who actually love our conference and love our schools. And it's something that needs to be in the forefront. But I guess we'll start with first just congratulating Benedict on their season, because regardless of how it ended, it was a historic season and they deserve all the recognition and honor and those accolades that they're receiving, because anybody who's played this sport, been around this sport, it is hard to go undefeated. I don't care who you are. That doesn't happen every day.
Yeah, man. I definitely shout out to BC, man. Definitely historic run and historic season, man. I mean, again, as an alumni, somebody that played in that program, it's just good to see, how far the program is coming. Even talking to some alumni yesterday, is everybody can see the growth. And, again, man, everybody feels like it's a whole different program. So big shout out to BC, shout out to Coach Berry, man, for what they doing, man.
Yeah, and I want to say this too, like, because I see Eric Phoenix down here. Like I said this a couple weeks ago, and I was really trying to push, that agenda and talking point. Like, this Benedict team is one of the best side teams of all time. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of what happened yesterday, like the domination in the SIAC, and then we put it on Pulse on Instagram and YouTube, beating all four previous SIAC championship schools of the past 10 years, and Fort Valley, Albany State, Tuskegee, and Miles. That's big. And oftentimes with our conference, we're forgotten sometimes, so we have to continue to tell that story because this was big.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I was thinking when you mentioned that on the podcast earlier this week about just them, beating the previous. Um, I think not only beating them, I think beating them soundly is something that I found. It wasn't. They didn't fluke. I told you. I know in the CIAA there were people who were saying that Virginia Union was the best team in the CIAA, and I told you, well, what's going to separate great teams and good teams are winning the games they are supposed to win. You can't take anything away from Benedict because Benedict won all the games that they were supposed to win to become SIAC champions. So there's no question. They left no doubt. And that's a testament. And I hope Coach Berry is around a couple more seasons. Or one of those coaches that retire at these places. I'm one of those ones that talk about. I don't look at our schools as stepping stones, because our vision should always be to move our institutions forward to one day that our schools are the destination. Because in my mind, we are the destination. So, um, just as we grow, as institutions, and you get people like Coach Bear, they don't come around often. I'm here to tell you, like coaches like Coach Bear, who I, you go back through the season and you get a personal, you get a personal foul after the play, you're done with him. I've seen him do that 2 or 3 times in the season. Like, hey, bye.
Yeah, he
Like,
did that during the conference championship game, man. Honestly, that was the first time I actually really paid attention to it. I know yesterday we had a situation uh, where one of our players, it looked like he was finna get a personal foul, but the ref ended up waving the flag off. And me and some of the other alumni was looking like, man, that ain't a kid we want to send to the locker room. But you got to have a ton of respect for that aspect of it because, again, that throws that selfish mentality out the window. Like, you cannot be selfish and play this game. So, yeah, a ton of respect for him for doing that.
definitely, definitely. So I'm gonna turn this over to y'all, but I just want to. It's something that has been bothering me. Okay. Um, when we talk about every time we get to the playoffs, because now it has been amped up. I see a lot of people after we lose in playoff games. And anybody who's been around the SIAC as long as I've been around, you've seen some really good teams um, come from Albany State that you would think would have the ability to have a major run in the playoffs. And then they get around and they get knocked out first round. And it feeds this deeper conversation of whether we play a quality brand of football. I was in the HBCU nightly um, room last night, and they had the coach KJ Black. He has a coaching fellowship with the LA Rams, and he talked about how in these circles when they recruit these HBCU players that they only talk about the games against FBS teams, and he even said that they consider like the brand of football like high school is bad football, and although we know better than that, when we go against PWIs or just out of conference teams in general, we tend to fall. Like we lose more times than we win. And it's how we lose if that makes sense. Like we can be dominant. We've had dominant Albany State teams. That Albany State team that went to the SIAC last year was dominant as well. That was a dominant team. They get to the playoffs, they get West Georgia, and what should be a Albany State win, they fall apart. And it's how these teams dominate us. It's just not them beating. I could take a Benedict losing to Wingate by a field goal because we know that the special teams has been a problem for Benedict all year. I would have been okay.
Let me cut you off real quick. I think one of the biggest things that we got to do as a conference is, again, a team like Wingate. I think we got to schedule one of those teams. And again, I'm not saying across the board in the conference because I know Tuskegee. I know they've had their run-ins. I know that Albany State, but I think that we definitely got to add some more of those teams into our schedules. You know what I'm saying? Get that out of conference schedule because I think yesterday the biggest thing that I seen and I noticed with Benedict because I feel like that week off might have been something that hurt him. You talk about taking a week off to get healed up and stuff like that, but I feel like sometimes once you got that engine rolling, you just gotta keep throwing punches. And I feel like that week off might have slowed Benedict down just a tad. But I think something that we have to do as a conference is definitely schedule those out of conference games. And I'm not talking about going to the CIAA necessarily, but I'm talking about making sure we add a Wingate, a team that has playoff runs. Because again, Wingate, this wasn't their first rodeo. So again, I think that's something that we have to do. We have to go after those teams to get them on the schedule.
What I'll say is that I've learned a lot this year when it comes to the playoffs because I never really truly saw the value of it, especially in when I was here that going to the playoffs would make schools lose money. But I'm still conflicted because when you hear about what happened with FAMU and the FCS playoffs, and then you hear them blame Albany State because Albany State played FAMU and for the past 3 years Fort Valley played FAMU, and it's like, do we value culture or do we value trying to go into these white spaces and win? And it's like, I want to see, as an HBCU fan, I wanted to see Benedict versus Union. I wanted to see Eric Phoenix and DeAndre Duhart in Northern Scotland versus Jada Byers. And I understand that we're trying to beat Wingate, but for the culture, I think people will buy that. People will watch that. But I'm just so conflicted because what I think, and I know Steven spoke on this, and I would love him to expound on it, because I think he had a great point, is that in the SIAC, and I think the CIAA, we're run first teams. Like, what I saw from Wingate, they were passing the ball to start that game. They were airing it out, saying, hey, like, we're going to try passing the ball to see what y'all do. Like, that's what they were doing. So I think it's not just, oh, we got to schedule Wingate and these teams. I think we have to look at the style of play in our conferences, because we're run first teams and we normally get beat by teams with good offensive lines. They can put on the quarterback and both. So I don't think it's just we're scheduling, like we're not scheduling out of conference enough. That is something, but I think it's also the style.
I I agree with both of those points. But to another point about being a run first team, I think for a couple of years there have been this notion in the SIAC of run first, because you had Savannah State, um, the offense they were running. You got Kentucky State that runs that option, and you have Albany State, and then you had Slater at Tuskegee, who still bleeding, going under center and running the football. Um, but then you get the different styles, because you have the Allens, you have the Central States, um, who just want to spread you out and throw the ball around. My problem is, and like I said on your podcast earlier, is we get beat in the trenches. We get beat in the trenches every time. We just is even with that defensive line for Wingate. I didn't realize that they actually had a Tuskegee transfer. They had DJ Horn, was one of their defensive ends, and when I saw that, I said, "Wait!" It made me go look at their defensive line. Um, Man, they beat us up with talent that's in our schools back door. And that's something that drives me insane. That they come down in those places where coaches, and if you go in those high school rooms, those coaches talk about our coaches not reaching out. Like they talk about like these areas that are under recruited. Then you go and you look at a team like Wingate and like, okay, well, where are they getting this talent from? And then you look and see it's in your back door. I mean, what is DJ Horn from Lawrenceville, Alabama? I mean, they hit Phoenix 7 times yesterday. Like there were 7 sacks recorded. This guy came from our back door, and we have to sit down and sit with some of the things that we are doing when they talk about bulletin board material for the team. I think some of our coaches need bulletin board material. They need to know that Fayetteville State has lost 9 times to Wingate. Like this has to sit in our minds that yes, we can run through our conference. And it's not just, I know some people make it out to be a black white thing. It's not, because even the predominantly white institutions in our conference, they have the same problem across the sport. I told you that Spring Hill has done, they on like a 140 game winning streak against SIAC volleyball team.
they get to the first round of the playoffs, they are destroyed. They are crushed. So
Well,
I'm gonna
D
let
two.
Steven
Let me
talk.
hold on real quick before Steven say something. As a high school coach, man, it is a bit frustrating when you try to, especially me. I try to help these HBCUs out, especially even with kids that are not in our program down here. Like I try to help, hey man, look, this kid is good. Like check them out. But it is frustrating when, they put a lot of things that you text them and stuff like that on the back burner, and then again, like you say, you got a kid from Alabama at Wingate. Those coaches don't. You know what I'm saying? Like they'll hit you back, they'll text you back right away. And I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, and again, I know they try to say resources and we don't have this, but if you look at the landscape of football, high school football, a lot of alumni from these HBCUs are coaching at a lot of these high schools. So again, I think they use a lot of those excuses, man. They gotta start jumping on these kids. But yesterday I was having a conversation with an alumni, a guy that played at Savannah State, and the first thing came out of his mouth was, why Eric Phoenix ain't playing um at Savannah State? Like why is he at Benedict? But I think a lot of times kids do want to leave home. Sometimes it's not the kid that don't want to actually go there. If that was their last option, they probably would end up there. But I think a lot of times kids want to leave home, man, and experience something new.
Hey, what's up, fellas? This Coach Thomas checking in. Uh, just want to pick off what we talking about with what I feel like the difference between uh, some of us at these SIAC schools and why we not able to compete with some of your PWIs. I think it kind of goes back to culture as well. When you talk about the HBCU coaches and Coach Thomas, my boy Pope Cannon, man, I feel your frustration too, bro. Me as a high school coach myself, a lot of times, man, when you reach out to a lot of these HBCUs, all right, the first thing they're trying to really do is stockpile their team with D1 transfers or, your transfer portal kids. They kind of get that microwave success. And it's not really their fault, but it's the pressure of having to win early and often to kind of keep a job versus at like a Wingate when you got that freshman that you can red shirt or them few lineman red shirts that you can bring up within your program 3 to 4 years so they get it versus playing against a kid that may have like you said, you go down Benedict roster, you go down Albany State roster, you're gonna see, I guarantee, the guys that making the plays or whatnot transferred from some other four-year institution versus when you look at your Wingates and stuff, or you like your Valdosta States in West Georgia, a lot of those guys are kids that come fresh out of high school and didn't play maybe their first 2 years. So it's a culture thing that I think what really separates the HBCU right now and the PWI D2. Um, that's just my 2 cents, man. I think it's more of a culture, and D2, you did speak about the trenches, but once again, that goes back to I'm getting that 6'4", 270 guy out of high school, and he ain't seeing the field till he developed, his not into his red shirt sophomore year or red shirt junior year. So that's just my 2 cents, fellas, on that.
Go ahead, Steven.
Yeah. First off, how's everybody doing? Hope everybody's doing well. I'm gonna be on for a second, and I'm gonna have to duck off because I'm checking into a hotel. I'm just coming from our basketball tournament. But to what the coach was saying, I definitely feel the frustration, and I know that, or just the reality of it. But I also know, I think that's across D2 football. I know when Winston-Salem State played against Valdosta State in the championship 10 years ago, before there even was a transfer portal, WSSU had a lot of transfers, but so did Valdosta State. Valdosta State had like 16 D1 transfers, and this is even before there's a transfer portal. So, I mean, I think that everybody wants transfers if you can get them at that D2 level. There's the great coach Bill Hayes once said, you can show me a good D2 player, or it was a couple coaches that said, you show me a good D2 player, I don't want him. I want I want the best player that I can get. So, I mean, the transfer portal, I mean, it's been a thing before it was a transfer portal. It's just more visible now, but I think coaches have always been trying to look and fill those spots. Um, and it's just I think it's a tough situation. You also talk about coaching staffs and at HBCUs. A lot of times you just got to look at just the numbers even the coaching the coaching number of a coach at certain schools. Like I know there's some schools in the CIAA who have maybe 5 assistants, or even less than that. You know what I mean? And you can't tell me that, because if there's only 5 assistants and all of them are recruiting coordinators, there's only so much that you can handle. You know what I mean? It's I think there's so many things to think about. When you talk about the SIAC needing to play against quality opponents and things like that, or just D2s needing to play quality opponents, I think that this CIAA has been doing that. I know Wingate has been, wailing on Fayetteville State for a long time. And then they've been playing Shaw recently. They've also played Johnson C. Smith and some of the other schools that are there close to them because they're regional. And I think for them, when we come back to that style of play argument, there's also, I think there's a lot that's a very interesting thing. I know just watching Wingate play against Virginia Union the other day. I knew Wingate was a really good defensive team. I didn't know how good they were, but they were a really good defensive team. And I knew the one really good defensive team the two really good defensive teams that Union saw all year were Bowie State and Fayetteville State, and both of those teams went down to the wire. And I would say that neither one of those offenses were nearly as dynamic as what passing wise as what Wingate had. Their quarterback didn't set the world on fire, but he was a pocket passer. He was a guy who could make things happen in the pocket, and he could get on the run and scramble. He did it against Virginia Union, and he did it against Wingate. Plays broke down, and I don't know. He was just able to make things happen. And I think, I look at the passing stats and the SIAC, and I know that there are a couple teams that might throw it more than others, but throughout the course of a 10-game season, I don't think that there was a single passer that hit over 2,000 yards. You know what I mean? So I think I think the HBCUs that have had runs that have been able to be successful in the playoffs, Tuskegee, even a couple years when they made their runs, they had, adequate quarterbacks, some adequate quarterback play. That goes a long way. You got to have a good defense, and I think we figured that out. You got to have a good defense. You do have to be able to run the ball, but that was the thing that worried me about Virginia Union when I saw them against Fayetteville State, was that they were able to still win that game by 3 points, but their passing game gave them nothing. They had 51 yards of passing, and it just so happened that Jada Byers was able to go out there and break some really big runs, and that was the difference there. And then I saw them against Wingate, 6 weeks later, and, Jada Byers was still good. Jada Byers was still tough to pin down, but there were situations where they had to pass the ball and they just were inept. They they threw 2 pick-sixes. So there's so many things that come into play, and I even heard this was interesting too when you talk about the perception of HBCUs, and then I'll step off. I even heard the Wingate coaches telling their players prior to the game that when they were down in the trenches, they were like, they're gonna hold. Like that's what they were saying about the Union offensive line, and also the offensive line at Union was great in the run game, but they were really bad. They were really pass blocking. They weren't so great. They weren't versatile, and that reared its head against Fayetteville State, and it was just exacerbated by a good Wingate program, like as you said, that's been there before. They have a quarterback that is going to make your defensive backs have to be disciplined. There were times that, from what I understand in that Benedict game, that the defensive backs just fell apart and they just got sliced away. And I think part of that is they don't see a lot of teams that are predominantly passing in their league. That are and are good at it in their league. And I think that's why it will behoove. Benedict didn't play a single team that wasn't an HBCU. They played Elizabeth City, which is, they got a couple wins this year, but they're still they're not a good program. They're not a measuring stick program. And I think a lot of that came back to bite them yesterday.
And Steve, that's what I was saying. I think it'll be great for him to go find a Wingate, early in the season. And I think that's for every program in our conference. Just go find somebody that's different, that can give you a test and make you have to scheme up, you know, differently.
Yeah, I know we're pretty lucky here in the CIAA territory and North Carolina especially. There's so many schools. Like Catawba is right down the road from WSSU, from Johnson C. Smith, from literally down the road from Livingstone. So it is a little bit easier. There's not as many D2s outside of the Gulf South once you guys get in that SIAC region. But I mean, even then, when you can play them. I mean, and you look at Virginia Union this year, yeah, it was great that they beat Valdosta State, but we saw Valdosta State wasn't the Valdosta State, and they still had to put up a hell of an offensive fight to beat them. So it definitely can be a lot. Regional is definitely going to make for the ease. But I think, and I know a lot of people want more CIAA SIAC matchups. I'm not really crazy about it. I mean, I think, the right year, the right two teams. I did enjoy WSSU and Tuskegee. I did enjoy that because I know Tuskegee brought fans to WSSU, and I know WSSU brought fans to Tuskegee, and I think there's a lot of instances to get that level of financial payout from it. And then competitively, I mean, it really is. So many of the teams are so defensive minded and run first that like it is just good to get somebody that's a little bit more balanced. Just my opinion from what I've seen over the last decade or so.
We got the president of Edward Waters University up here. We're gonna turn the floor over to you, Doc. Doc might do it, but to Stephen's point, he said something that was really interesting. Who that are good at it, and you're right about that. Out of all our schools that are heavy passing teams, Central State, Allen, their offensive lines were not up to par for it. Yeah, it was pitch and catch type of football. So you are very correct on that. So
Yeah.
that's
Good evening, everybody. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
we can
sir.
hear you,
Go
Doc.
ahead.
Hey, good evening. How is everybody?
Awesome.
Good, good. Listen, I just want to chime in for a moment and just say congratulations to Benedict College and their entire staff and team and coaching staff. And I wanted to kind of briefly invoke the words of legendary HBCU coach Billy Joe. He always says that, believe it or not, winning in football starts with the administration, and it starts squarely in the president's office. So we would be remiss if I don't think that we acknowledge the leadership of Dr. Artis in the investment that's been made. I mean, yeah, we can talk about the coaches, we can talk about all that, but I can tell you as a president, it starts in the president's office. If there is a commitment to winning from the leadership, then you'll have a successful program. If there isn't, you won't. And that's where it starts and stops. So certainly want to uplift Dr. Artis and her leadership for the historic season that Benedict had. I'll say this too, and of course, my heart bleeds purple and orange as president of Edward Waters, but I'm also an Albany State University graduate, been following that program since I was in school in the late 90s. And one of the inconvenient truths, and I just say this may be controversial, but we have a culture issue in our conference. And I'm not saying that in terms of recency. I'm talking about going back. I've been, again, following this conference, been a part of this conference as an alum for 25 years now. I can remember back to 1997, Albany State went completely undefeated, won in the first round of the playoffs, made it to the second round, and just fell apart. I can go to 2004. It was the greatest HBCU D2 team I've ever seen. 2004, we beat Valdosta State during the regular season, went 12-1, made it to the NCAA quarterfinals. So won our first game against Arkansas Tech. We're hosting throughout the playoffs all the way to the championship game. Got to the national quarterfinal, was up 24-0 at halftime, 24-9 at the end of the third quarter. Going into the fourth quarter, and lost the game 38-24. 2010 Black College National Champions, undefeated, get to the first round against North Greenville. I think it was with the Delta State of North Greenville, and just fall completely apart. What I see, with the culture of many of our programs, Tuskegee's had its runs. We get to play the PWIs, and it's almost like we're a deer in headlights. It's like, okay, now we're playing, white coaches, and it's like we don't think that we're good enough. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I've watched it. It is something endemic that we have got to overcome. We've got to believe that we can compete. Again, I've watched teams who get in these games. I'm not saying this happened in the Benedict game. I don't know. I didn't watch it, but over the years, I've seen our teams get in these games and play totally uncharacteristic football. Do things that you've not seen them do in 2 years. That 2004 Albany State team won, I think, 21 straight games over 2 seasons. That year before, they went to the Pioneer Bowl, beat Fayetteville State. Won 20, and then got in this game and just fell completely apart. And so, I think it's more of a psyche issue. I think that we overcome that by scheduling more of these institutions during the regular season. You've seen the Tuskegees that are scheduling West Georgia. I remember when I was at Tuskegee, as a matter of fact, one year, I think it was 2016 or 17, we were short, needing an additional year to make the playoffs. We went up to a school, I think it was like Findlay or something like that, and got drugged. Just completely, just uncharacteristic things that you've never seen that Tuskegee squad do all year long. And so again, I think it's a byproduct of us not, number one, really believing that we can win, that we can be successful. And I think that will come again with more familiarity. The last thing that I'll say is that when you look at the Wingate, and you look at the Valdosta States, and you look at, those institutions that are not only in our region, some of the ones that dominate D2 up in the Midwest and up toward that Wisconsin, Green Bay area, you're talking about booster clubs there, folks, that put in tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of dollars into their program. So that's the other inconvenient truth that we got to talk about when we talk about HBCU sports, HBCU athletics. Everybody comes around and is excited, for these classics and these kind of things. But what are your booster clubs doing? How are you supporting that institution in terms of having the full allotment of 36 scholarships? How many assistant coaches are you all funding? The institution can only do so much. Let's be real honest. Pretty much all our schools, whether CIAA or SIAC, we serve a high population of Pell eligible students. Okay. So if you have a president like a Dr. Artis or Dr. Luke at Virginia Union, I promise you, they're putting in all that they can put in. But as alums, and I can say this not only as a president, but as an Albany State alum, we're not doing our part. We talk a big game, but we're not doing our part in terms of supporting these programs from a facilities perspective, from a scholarship perspective. Right now, I'm having to battle the fact that my kids can't get the Pell refund, right? I need to use all their Pell for scholarships. Whereas if I'm competing against a PWI, they get that, and then they get a big refund back. Most of our institutions can't afford to do that. So we're talking about why would that kid choose a Wingate over a Savannah State? Because maybe that school's putting $4,000 or $5,000 back in their pocket when my institution can't afford to do that, right? So we've got to really talk about, if we want to win on a national level, not just be pleased with winning SIAC championships, because I know that's how I've been as an Albany State alum. I don't count success now at Albany State by winning the SIAC championships. We've done that. We won 4 or 5 straight from 2003, 2007. That's nothing. We do that all the time. The measure of success now is on a national level, but in order for our conference to compete at that level, you got to look at these other conferences and look at what their alums and their booster clubs are putting into those programs. In many respects, they're almost matching what the institution's putting in. Up to $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. They're putting in dollars, not just talk. They put in the resources to back up what they say they want from their programs. That's the inconvenient truth. And if we're going to ever move to where we would say we want to move to as a conference, we got to get our alums, we got to get our ADs to partner with our alums, to partner with the business sector, to put the resources that we need behind these programs. So anyway, but congratulations again to Benedict. But again, if we're going to move to that next level, it starts at the top. There's got to be a culture change. And then there also have to be resources beyond just the institution. I'm also a University of Georgia grad. UGA does not put the bulk of the money for UGA at the D1 level does not come from the University of Georgia. It comes from their booster programs, their fundraising athletic association arms. That's who puts the money into these programs. We're not going to ever be able to compete with these big boys, even at the D2 level, until we start putting in commensurate resources coming from our alums and the business and corporate communities that go to support our programs. So anyway, I'll be quiet. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate y'all.
Hey, President, man, I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate your aspect and appreciate your insight. You definitely make a great point, with all of that, especially with the booster part. And I hate to say the B word just because I'm a coach, but you definitely made a great point about, us as alumni stepping in and, getting stuff started on the side for our programs. But again, appreciate your insight on all of that stuff. And, shout out to Edward Waters. I know that you guys won 5 games this season. So it's definitely something brewing down here in Florida.
No doubt, send some kids our way. Let me know. If you hear from our coaches, you just let me know.
Oh, I know. Oh, I already know. A couple of y'all coaches came out of school last year. So
For sure.
I already know. They in the hunt.
Good stuff.
Yeah, Doc, I really appreciate that insight too. I want to ask you this. So, as an Albany State grad, one of the things that I start doing on my platform is sometimes when I'm talking about these teams, I will tweet out their giving link. When a lot of our schools, I talk about being active on that front. I think a lot of times we're a little bit too passive on that raising money side. And I understand there's just, a lot of responsibilities and we don't have the staff. But just simple things to just attaching the link to give to our post on social media. When we have these big wins, like when Lane beat Tennessee State, I didn't see not a single time did they tweet out access to give to their institution. And then you get on a website like Lane, I had to search, dig to get the link to give to them. Albany State was the same way. When I got on the Albany State page, they had a giving campaign going, like this $9 monthly recurring payment. I'm like, hey, I can give these folks $9, but I changed my mind because I said, you know what, I don't even have Tuskegee on auto pay, so I'm not going to put Albany State on auto pay. But it's like I'm following all the pages on LinkedIn. So I don't ever see. I know, of course, it's probably in those alumni circles, but as far as like just fans or expanding the brand, the people who aren't in that, who just may like what's going on, we don't know. We don't get to see those things, and it's like I wish our departments were active on that giving campaign side.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think it's ample opportunity. As a matter of fact, I think I saw you tweeting something out when Tennessee State, Lane beat Tennessee State. That's a great opportunity for you to say, hey, look what we have going on. Support these programs. And I mean, certainly not casting aspersion on any of those institutions, but I'll just say this from a general perspective, it starts with your ADs. A lot of our ADs don't understand that their primary role is to go and raise money. I'm just being honest with you. I mean, the administrative stuff, I can find that. I just hired a new AD here at Edward Waters, and I've said, to her, very forthrightly, hey, the institution is giving all that we can give at this point to our athletic program. We made the investment. In order for us to take it to the next level, I need someone that's going to come in, to your point, and see those opportunities. I mean, you would think that would just, that's just something that's low hanging fruit. Hey, we just had a big win. Let's capitalize on that. But I'll be honest with you. A lot of our athletic administrative leadership and even presidential leadership don't necessarily see those opportunities. They aren't in those spaces on social media. And so, we definitely, I think as a collective, have to do a much better job of taking advantage of those opportunities and not making it where it's so incredibly difficult. Like you said, well, you got to go and, click through 5 or 6 different pages to find where you can give, to support the program. So I think you're spot on. I think those are definitely areas of some real significant improvement that we can make. But again, that's what it's going to take. I'm just being honest. I mean, we can talk about it. We can do all we want to do. But I've said at some of these institutions, as president, I look at the budgets. The differentiating factor is the external support that your Wingate, your Valdosta states, your Delta states, what they bring in from their alums, and also the business community in those. Don't discount the business community, the corporate community. What they do. I mean, I spent some time at Mississippi Valley State, and that's a D1 SWAC school. But I will tell you, in the Delta, where they got more corporate sponsorships at Delta State, the D2, than they do at Valley. Now, of course, we know there's certainly some racial undertones to that, but the reality is just that it's often even beyond the alumni. It's about getting your city, your county, the businesses in that area to understand and be a part of what you're doing there as well. I mean, it really takes all of that. And without that, it's going to continue to be very, very difficult for us to compete from a resource perspective. I mean, because athletics is an arms race, y'all. It's an arms race. Who's building a new building? Who can do this? Who can do that? Your residence halls, it's something that my institution, I'll be honest, we struggle with, residence halls. If I'm looking at institution A and they got brand new residence halls and my institution has got residence halls that's 40 years old, which one you going to choose? And it's different from when we were in school, right? These kids like, man, I don't care nothing about your tradition at Tuskegee. Man, I want this dorm. I want this suite. I want X, Y, and Z. They not moved by the same things that we were moved by, 20 years ago. So,
President,
it's a challenge. Yeah.
Question for you. Do you think the HBCU title slows companies down from dealing with certain institutions? Do you think that's something that could be a holdback? Like if that's something you ride off of?
Maybe in the past. I certainly don't think that's the case now. The time right now is right for HBCUs. I'm gonna be honest with you. From the philanthropic space, really coming off of George Floyd and everything. Now, the corporate community is wanting to find ways to invest. Diversity and equity and inclusion is just everywhere in the space. So I don't think that our being HBCUs is holding us back. I think it's about us taking the initiative and telling our story. All of our institutions, especially in this conference, I mean, you got phenomenal institutions from Tuskegee to Clark Atlanta to Savannah States to, Benedict Colleges to the Edward Waters Universities. I mean, you have historic institutions that are not just historic, but are also contemporaneously relevant. I mean, that are doing phenomenal work right now. So no, I would definitely disagree that the HBCU moniker is an impediment. If anything, right now, I think it really gives us a leg up. I really do.
And I want to chime in because I can look at it from a lot of different fronts because I was in account executive. I worked in sales at iHeart when I first got out of college back in 2020, 2021. Then also, partnering with League Pass and being, in these different conversations, understanding what they have going on behind the scenes. I really think that HBCUs are hot, and they've been hot even before Deion Sanders got to Jackson State. Because I know on the poll side of things, like we've got a lot of interested people that want to, work with us. I know with League Pass, they've been interfacing, with different folks, and you see it on those broadcasts. Like I think it's all about that story. Like in sales, what we're taught to sell the streams. So if you have Morehouse, you got Tuskegee, you have these great players, you got Benedict that went 11-0. You're selling that to companies for the next year. Try to lock them into an annual. or quarterly or something along those lines. Then you have to get creative as far as creating campaigns or creating situations that these companies can be a part of. Like a perfect example is like when I watched the Brooklyn Nets basketball games. Like when Kevin Durant like shoots a jump shot and it's the first shot, that first shot is sponsored by Hyundai. You know,
Right.
like why don't we do things like that when you have Morehouse in the conference, got Fort Valley in the conference, Tuskegee, Edward Waters, you have all these amazing schools. We have to be inventive with working with these businesses because they want to buy with HBCUs, like I said, especially after 2020. But we have to invent avenues to work with them, and that's why with League Pass, like as a partner, I can say with HBCU League Pass Plus, they did an amazing job with that. And I can't speak for like the side with Benedict, but like I think 6 or 7 of those games were on League Pass. So like, and including the playoff game. So like those are things like that work. So it's like we have to figure out ways to interface with these companies to get that money flowing into the athletic program.
No, I absolutely agree. And I have to shout out just a phenomenal athletic administrator. I know people don't pay a whole lot of attention to this conference, but as we're talking about this subject, I really would ask your listeners to go and take a look at what Dr. Kiki Barnes is doing with the GCAC. Okay. They are making major moves. Like they are making some major moves in the GCAC, which is the NAIA, conference of our institutions. And I think that some of the work that they're doing is kind of what I'm talking about, how we engage, the corporate community. How do we engage those media partners that can really, really get our brand out there? We've had some new leadership in the SIAC. I'm confident that we're going to be hopefully announcing some big changes soon as well, to really begin to build upon the brands that we have. I mean, like you said, we got Morehouse, Tuskegee, Clark Atlanta, Edward Waters, Benedict, Lane, Savannah State. You've got, Fort Valley. We have a brand to sell, but it's about, getting in from the right persons and leveraging think about our alumni base. You're talking about, the potential is endless there, but we've got to leverage it. But again, until we're able to combine those resources that are coming from our alums, from our local business communities, and then from our conference in terms of how we're branding the conference nationally, I'm telling you all, that is the dividing factor. That is what is keeping us in large part from taking that next step comparative to some of these PWIs. But I'm optimistic we can get there. But we've got to shift our thinking, shift our paradigm in order for us to really realize the kind of success that I think we want on the whole as a conference.
Right, and I want to say this too, to piggyback off that point as well about telling the story and all the amazing institutions. Like I was watching the Bayou Classic yesterday. I was watching Bayou Classic and the Benedict game. It was a lot going on. But one thing about the SWAC is that whenever you watch a SWAC game nationally, whether it was on NBC or ESPN or anywhere, they're going to let you know, well, Michael Strahan went to Texas Southern and Jerry
Absolutely.
Rice. Yep. We have Shannon Sharp. We got Unc. Why are we even letting these folks? Unc went to Savannah State. He was giving the boys the work. And right. he talked about, Fort Valley, we used to put foots in Fort Valley. Then he said a few shows later, one time they beat us. That he talks about it on Undisputed. And then he was on, I think last year, they did a situation where he was doing something for the Celebration Bowl, where he was involved in, I think, either the spring one or the one that happened in December. Why isn't he involved in, SIAC championship? Why don't we have a stream on ESPN or something with Shannon Sharp talking to people? And I know with Fox Sports that might be hard, but there's folks that's not signed to Fox Sports that were alum that played football.
Absolutely.
I feel like we're not fully telling the story because our history is rich too. You know what I'm saying? And D2H football, he talks about it all the time. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like we have to tell the story of the athletes that have been in our conference. Yeah, other amazing alumni, celebrities that have come from our conference. We have to tell that story to really get ourselves out there, and from there we then monetize that story.
I think you're spot on. Like I said, I agree with every single thing that you've said, and I can say this in this SIAC chat, this SWAC, SIAC, MEAC, or what have you. Let me tell you something. Most of them schools, I'm just gonna go. Most of them schools we could beat any other. You look at Alabama State and Tuskegee. Tuskegee hands it to them almost all the time. Alabama A&M won't play Tuskegee because they're scared to beat them. Albany State could barely get. I'm just gonna keep. Albany State can't get guarantee games because they don't want to play them. So all this. There's this superiority complex that some of these schools have. Now don't say that for somebody else. You don't want to play a lot of these D2s because they might look up and beat you.
And I want to say this too. I want to say that University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, shout out them. They beat Alabama State in the Turkey Day Classic, and Lane had them scared to fight the first, second week of the season. What does that tell?
Exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, those SWAC, I'm always, gathering the SWAC because there's been time that Tuskegee has beaten the SIAC, the SWAC East and the SWAC West champ in the same year. So,
exactly.
I don't have that argument, and it goes back to something earlier. You look back at those. I was saying, people were talking about this resurgence of talent in the SWAC and where they are supposed to be now. You go back and you look at all the SIAC games, they were dogfights for all those SWAC schools.
That's right.
And they didn't play. You talking about Albany State, what I said on the podcast last week, Rhonda, who is probably the third or fourth best team in the SIAC, taking FAMU, the supposedly second best team in the SWAC, down to the wire. So it's one of those things where. Go ahead.
I want to say this real quick. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but even with that, they're vilifying Albany State because they didn't make, and we talked about it on the podcast. They didn't make the playoffs, so they're saying, it was Albany State's fault. Like that. That's the stuff where it's like, no, it's not. You didn't blow them out like they swear. Oh, because I honestly, hey, I'll go on a rant. Let me calm it down. But like that, I hate when folks say, "Oh, you're playing a D2 or it's just a D2." When it's like, I watched that game on HBCU Go. Albany State scored a touchdown first. They got an interception on Musa. So and then they're blaming Albany State. Well, we shouldn't play D2 anymore. When it's like you said, they didn't handle business against Jackson State.
Well, they didn't say that. They didn't say that last year when they played Fort Valley and made it. So I mean, what's the excuse now?
Exactly. And we played them pretty tough too. In that game, I was watching.
Absolutely.
From Shamar Bridges. Like Shamar Bridges was going in, but then FAMU decided to try. Because I think the game was tied because it was on Facebook. They decided to try in the second half, and we got beat. But it's like that's the point I bring up, where it's like Fort Valley was on the schedule and they made it last year. So what I was saying on the podcast, and maybe Steven can hop in and give his opinion if he's still here, or even you, President. But I think that they're going to stop putting us on the schedule, not because Tuskegee's going to beat us, Albany State's going to beat us. They're going to use the excuse now of, well, we're trying to make the playoffs just in case we don't make the Celebration Bowl. So we're not going to put Albany State on the schedule. We're going to put another school. And I feel like that's counterproductive,
Well, this isn't the first time actually that has happened, where D1 HBCU has that's had that happen. So actually, back in the day, before I was in school for sure, and before Central was back in the MEAC, Central was back in the CIAA, and A&T used to play Central and WSSU every year up until the end of the 90s. And what happened was the MEAC decided that, well, there were some teams that were playing multiple D2s, and they were trying to improve their overall strength of schedule. So they made a rule where you could only have one D2 a year. And they picked Central because they had the Aggie Eagle Classic going. And so they didn't play each other. There was about an 7 or 8 year gap where they didn't play each other until WSSU attempted to come up to D1 and was a provisional member of the MEAC. So, and of course, they've gone a decade or so without playing it now. So, the D1 versus D2 HBCU games, it can be tough. Obviously, Alabama State and Tuskegee kept theirs going for a long time until Tuskegee wanted to go to the playoffs, and they kind of severed that Turkey Day situation. I know Virginia State and Norfolk State, their rivalry, has had some gaps in there. Um, and certain D2, I think the AD over at Albany State made the case that for them why it makes sense is because, it's a chance for them to get. It's all about revenue. It's a chance for them to get a little bit of a guarantee because these two teams don't really get very many guarantee opportunities. And then for the D1s, it's a chance for them to, if they play the schedule the right way, it's a chance for them to. They can get some type of a payoff of it from it. So it's one of those things that's been a discussion for the past 30 plus years, mostly on the MEAC side, but now with FAMU trying to get into the FCS playoffs, it's discussion there as well.
So let me ask this, Stephen, really, really quickly. So, did Albany State being the SIAC champion and having like such a dominant run last year, does that factor into the strength of schedule? Because like the part that was befuddling to me is like they were acting like Albany State is like 0-11. It's like they just won the conference and they went to the playoffs and they had a dominant defense. So does that factor in when a D2 school is scheduled to like how good that D2 school is in accordance to the strength to the strength of schedule?
I'm sorry, Randall. Say that last part of your question one more
Okay,
time.
yeah, no problem. Like does how good like Albany State, they won the side championship, they made it to the playoffs, like, and I think they lost to West Georgia in 2021. So like they were a really good D2 opponent. So like does that factor in to the strength of schedule? Because that was the part I wasn't understanding. Is like you're playing our best, but it's like, oh well, you didn't make it because you played Albany State.
Well, so playing a D2 isn't necessarily great for your strength of schedule, but really, for what hurt FAMU more than anything was just that the rest of their schedule in the SWAC just wasn't great. Um, they had, they only had, well, the different, and one of the difference between last year and this year was that for one, they did play a D2 last year, but for one, they played. So I think they beat two teams. They beat two teams last year, and they beat two teams this year that had winning records. So they only had two opponents in the SWAC outside of Jackson State that had winning records, and they beat both of them. But then also South Carolina State was bad this year. I mean, they only won 3 games this year versus the 6 they won last year. So, and there were other teams that were in the postseason as well who got in with D2 playoff games. But of course, they're going to tell you that their conference is probably stronger than the SWAC. So, I think there was a lot of reasons that FAMU didn't get in. I don't think that had as big a reason as people would like for it to be. I think the best. I think you can still get away with one. You can still get away with one D2 game and one FBS game. But it's going to be interesting how the SWAC, what they do moving forward. Because at one point they had everybody playing each other, which wasn't nobody was thinking about the playoffs at that time really anyway. But now that you've got the league different, it's more expanded. Maybe there'll be talk of, I don't know, maybe some flexibility in the schedule. So we'll have to see. But there were a lot of things, I think, and I don't think that was as big as people wanted to make it.
It wasn't. I agree with Steven, man. It wasn't that. I think losing to Jackson State by 56-point probably was a bigger factor than anything else. The D2 argument is just a easy target, but the reality is that it goes down to like just like you guys were having a discussion earlier in the conversation about playing schools outside of your conference. That just has to happen more often outside of your HBCU family. Like you just got to start hopping into these PWR conferences and playing these guys and start winning the game. I mean, that's what it boils down to. So, and everybody and their reason is always, oh well, we play who's on our schedule. I'm like, yeah, you got 8 SWAC games. There's a factor when it comes to not being the conference not being respected because you guys don't win those out of conference games like that. So you have to be able to play these out of conference games and win them. So
makes sense.
Absolutely. I want to make this one point, and I'm gonna let Mr. Phoenix talk. I've been trying to get him up here every time we do this space, so I'm glad he's up here tonight. Um, Randall, to your point, I think those games are probably going to go away on the flip side too, because I know the SIC commissioner had hinted that they were going to 8-game schedule, but I saw that the AD for Albany State tweeted out that the conference is now going to this 8 conference game schedule, um, which is, I think it's 4 on 4 off rotation. So all the schools finally get to play each other, because we had this big break between Tuskegee playing Benedict. Um, so that's 8 games. If we play 10-game schedule, that leaves 2 games open. And I think we've had some in the past. I think the president talked about that year that we had to play an extra game, that we had to play a play-on game, because we did play 2 FCS teams that particular year, and we didn't have enough D2 games to qualify for the playoffs, because we didn't make the SIAC championship game, which would have gave us enough. So I think you'll see that schedule option get a little, because normally like Albany State plays 3 GSC teams to start. Well, lately they have to start the season off. So now you cut that down, because you have 8 conference games, which is going to make those out of conference opponents a little tougher to get, because you narrow the dates that you have open.
But then it becomes down at that point, it becomes a factor of you got to strengthen your conference at that point, right? And that was the argument I was saying about the SWAC. Like having an 8-game conference schedule means you're pretty much banking that your conference is going to have that respect if you want those playoff bids. But for something like the MEAC and the SWAC, they shouldn't care too much about it because of the Celebration Bowl.
Which could be a great opening conversation into the Pioneer Bowl to come back. I know that was, a lot like a big dissension, and I understand the playoff point because we've had playoff success, but I'm starting to really like that Celebration Bowl format. I really wish that somehow, some way, like it could be a discussion about the Pioneer Bowl coming back, because I think that would be way better for us, and then especially we get a good TV contract and all the different things, and a payout similar to what the Celebration Bowl does. I think that would be better for us.
It took 10 years for them to finally have that bowl game. That's all I'm going to tell you guys. It took almost a decade for all those athletic directors and presidents to agree.
And money on the table and an ESPN contract. Everybody wants to have that bowl game. Everybody wants to bring the Pioneer Bowl back, but somebody got to drop some serious coin for that. Because it's just like before we got the Celebration Bowl, we had the Heritage Bowl, and the problem there was sponsorship. You know what I mean? It was sponsorship and getting the buy-in from the ADs and from the presidents. I'm sorry, because as President Faison mentioned, I don't think people understand enough how important presidents are when you're talking about HBC sports in general, college sports in general. They think probably, they give a lot of preference to coaches and athletic directors who are there. But yes, when you're talking about moving conferences, or even I think most people still struggle to understand. I know as we talked about the MEAC and what they're doing moving forward, people fail to understand that the presidents and chancellors are the ones who run the conference. The conference commissioners, they represent the conference. They are supposed to be in charge of going and exploring what options they have available to them, but the power resides with those men and women that are the presidents and chancellors. And so, for them, it took, again, for the MEAC to get the Celebration Bowl, it took them years and it took them money on the table to financial reality. Because we could have a bowl game every year of the best D2s if we wanted to, but if it's not making money, that's just one more game that coaches and players are having to prepare for, and the schools have to pay for. That's not really, again, the bottom line is not there. So, it'd be great to have a D2 game, like the Celebration Bowl again. But, again, the Celebration Bowl doesn't happen unless ESPN puts that money down and says, hey, we're going to give you each conference this $1 million, and you can disperse it to your members how you like, and we go from there. So that's the elephant in the room there.
Man, that makes perfect sense. I get it. I get it.
Hey, you guys speaking on that Pioneer Bowl now, that's my language there. Of course, you guys know back a month ago before, Benedict played Tuskegee, I spoke about the Pioneer Bowl. But going to, like the doctor from Edward Water, president from Edward Water was talking about, now is a good time. I feel like we can reach out to these big corporations or franchises. Like I know, like here in Georgia where I'm at, man, we have, you got the 100 Black Men. You got then of course you got like McDonald's, Coca-Cola. If we can some kind of way get into companies like that to help push the drive for this Pioneer Bowl, I think it'd be great. And like you said, I think it's a good time. Not saying that we got to play the game in 2024, but like you said, with the Celebration Bowl having to, it took it some time for that to kick off. I mean, even if it's not till 2030, but to make sure we do it right in a continuous thing that can go on for D2s, I think it's something we need to really push. Even if it's not called the Pioneer Bowl, you can call it something else. But I do think the D2 needed. Like you had some schools that missed out on making the playoffs. They don't have nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like you had some 9-2 teams. I want to say Fayetteville had a good record this past year. You had Tuskegee, they lost in the championship game. That was just it. Like that's it. It's nothing else. Dion gets the option. Well, not really the option, but I mean, if he's not making the Celebration Bowl, he probably gets a bid into the playoffs. So I think it's something that we need to be pushing to bring back. Like I said, it don't have to happen overnight, but if it's not to 2030, 2035, I think it's something we need to push for to give these teams that that don't make it into the playoffs, man. Reward these kids for having, especially if you got 2 teams or 3 teams that tied with the same record. I mean that other team, I feel like should be able to go play for something.
I wish we could have like a real conversation just in general amongst the SWAC and the SIAA, because this is what was happening. I think it was last week when FAMU didn't make it, about a playoff system for HBCUs where the Celebration Bowl is like the national championship. I think that to a certain point that would
Oh
I
yeah,
feel
I
like that
like
would be
that.
good.
I like that too. Yeah, I talked about Black College playoff too, man. Yep. Shorten the season down to 8 or 9 games, but then that goes into D2 playoffs though. So I guess it's a little, but I don't know, man. I just think teams with good records, like your Tuskegee's, the Albany State, Fayetteville State that didn't make it. Something for
They
them
made it.
guys.
They didn't show up, but they made it.
Yeah, like I think you're talking about Fort Valley. I think you're talking about Fort
Yeah,
Valley.
yeah, yeah. My bad. Well, I mean, did all the CIAA teams make it? I mean,
2
that
did.
had a good record, I should say. That was pretty good.
I mean, they got 2 teams. They got 2 teams in.
Okay. But yeah, going like you say, Fort Valley. My bad. Yeah, Fort Valley definitely is another team that, like you said, what they finished 9-2 or 8
Yep.
and 2 or something,
Yep.
and that's it. Like that's anywhere else an 8-2 record. You either get a chance to go to the playoffs, and that's if you're talking all the way back to high school football. Imagine in high school if only the region champion made it to the playoffs in high school. So you might have a 9-1 team that don't even go to the playoffs that year. So I feel like these D2s that like your Fort Valleys that's finishing 8-2, shoot, we ain't got, you know what I'm saying? Like we just done. We just done.
But like what I will continue to say this because I keep the same energy with my school. If we beat Savannah State, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Now, granted, will we have made it to the second round? I don't know because I saw how the playoffs went for Fayetteville State, Benedict, and Union. But I mean, we got to beat Savannah State, and we're 9-1. Then we have a conversation about Fort Valley too. But that was on us. We didn't capitalize on that.
I want to let Mr. Phoenix get in if he wants to say anything.
Well, I want to say good evening, all y'all. Y'all can hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. You know, I've been coaching for over like 15 years on the high school level. And what I saw during the game is the elephant in the room that y'all not talking about is the officiating. You know, in Georgia, we call it home cooking. And like I tweeted earlier, you can't win like that. So if that's the norm and not an aberration, that's why, or one of the reasons why our teams are not advancing in the D2 playoffs, because all the officials was white, you know.
I got you. I was standing right down the sidelines. Definitely was a lot of questionable calls, a lot of calls missed, a lot of calls not made at all.
Right. And that changed the game. Because even with all that, when we scored, if we would have went for two, it would have been a one possession game in the third quarter. The score was 16-6. We went for an extra point, we missed it. But if we went for two, we'd have been one possession away. And so the game was that tight. But that pass interference call, the non-holding calls,
the hand to the face call was a terrible call.
Right. And so many, if you go back and look at the tape, it's so many. The first touchdown they scored, Looper got held in front of the ref. You take them points off the board. But if that's the norm, that's one of the reasons why we can't compete, because you can't play a team and the refs. And that needs to be talked about. And the second thing is, you know, you got to talk about the coaching, because I think the two teams talent-wise were even. You know, they were just more aggressive than us. They threw the ball on first down. We played a little timid. And I think that gave them a little leg up. If we focus on not being afraid, because I know the players wasn't afraid. You know, I can speak for some of them. But
Mr. Phoenix, let me ask you a question. Because I know yesterday, I looked back and it looked like there was some guys out there talking trash to the team. Y'all was on that sideline.
Right. They were.
One thing that I looked at yesterday too, and we talk about culture and we talk about fan base, is the entire game, the opposite team fan base was cheering for them. You know, they was engaged in the game. You know, first downs, they cheering, you know. So it's a lot of stuff that we, again, as Benedict, as you know, we don't bring that it factor.
Right. But I'm gonna speak to that. When we played Tuskegee, we actually had that. You know, I think a lot of it was the students went home for the break, so we didn't have all the young fan base at the game. We had a lot of old alumni. But when we played Tuskegee, we had all that. We had the defense. The crowd was wild. We had all that support. So I think we got to get the younger fans, the younger alumni to come to the game more than the older ones.
Speak on that situation that happened yesterday with the players and the fans. Like, I mean, I looked over and I seen that it was like, you know, a conflict. But what was that? What was going on in that situation?
They were just, just telling them, they suck because they were losing. You know what y'all doing, and the players was, didn't like it.
Okay.
That's all that was.
I have a question. So Benedict was hosting the game, so there wasn't SIAC officials that were calling it, or were those SIAC officials?
All I know, all the officials was white. I don't know what
SIAC officials was holding balls and stuff.
What?
Yeah, they were holding the ball, holding the chains. Because I asked one of the guys. I said, "Hey man, like, because he had a SIAC shirt on." I say, "Why you not? Are you an official or you just?" He said, "Yeah, I'm an actual paid official. This is my job for the day." But yeah, man, it was a lot of, man. Listen, it was bad, man. It was bad officiating. I mean, you had to be there to see it.
That's weird.
One thing I'll say,
but
just for everyone to know,
that's always the case.
Those
So I mean, you just gotta, like, at the end of the day, I mean, you just got to be better than that. I mean, you just have to be better than that.
Right,
And
but if you know football, you can't be, you know, how many touchdowns they could take off the board like that. You cannot beat the refs. The refs are undefeated in the history of football.
I mean, the
Yeah,
situation that I've seen, I'm gonna tell you one situation that stood out to me. It was 3rd and 7, and we had just stopped them, but they hit us with a hand in it. Like, I guess a guy got his hand to the face mask.
Right.
Like, I don't feel like, honestly, I mean, I get it happens, but I feel like that type of stuff happens a lot more than not.
Right.
But at that moment in the game, you don't throw that penalty. Like, it just, you know,
But
I just
that
felt
being
like that
said,
was one of the worst calls you could have made.
right.
You know,
No, go back.
that was game changing.
If you can, go back and watch the first touchdown they scored and watch Lupa Denali get held in front of the ref and they don't throw the flag. If you can go back and watch the tape.
You can.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be honest though. Like, I've been.
we got to figure out. We got to figure out how to.
Yeah.
You got to figure out how to win.
You got to
besides
overcome
that.
that.
I mean,
No,
they're
you
not
got
the first
to.
HBCU to have a
I
playoff
agree.
game.
I agree.
And it's just
I
part
agree.
of it. I mean, we've seen HBCUs
That's how that goes.
be able to go out and win in spite of that. I mean, they probably and all of them will tell you they have the same thing going on with them. But
Absolutely.
that's you got to go into the game knowing that. And I think, maybe, the second time around, maybe if, Benedict gets a chance to go back in next year, maybe they will know that. But I mean, I think the coaches have to be prepared for that reality. Unfortunately, I mean, that just is the way it is. And that's why the teams that have been able to do it in advance that are HBCUs, like, I think we need to look at what they were able to do well. And they had, for the most part, there's certain things that they had going for them that, even though the refs may not have been in their favor, they just had to be good enough to overcome that. And it's not impossible, but there's a way to do it and a blueprint to do it. And unfortunately, I think none of the HBCUs that played in this year's playoffs, and I'm talking about Benedict, Fayetteville State, or Virginia Union, were equipped to do it. And it's just every time it has happened, recently in the last decade, it's been certain types of teams that and that have that dynamic offense and show it throughout the season. And so when they get to the playoffs, they're not having to search for it and wonder if they can do it. They know that they can do it. And I just feel like, again, this is like the teams that win in the playoffs of ours, they have a certain formula, and the teams that don't, it's kind of the same situation.
Mr. Phoenix, I want to ask you, what do you feel that Wingate up front, what were they doing that caused Benedict so much problems in protection yesterday?
Well, what they did was they had 4 beasts on the D line that you could see from the Virginia Union game. How they held Jada Byers to 30 yards through 4 quarters, and you couldn't run on that, so there was no point of trying. They had 2 space eaters that you couldn't block and 2 edge rushers that were just coming, and that's what pretty much it took us a quarter to get adjusted to the speed of those edge rushers, and then we start, gaining ground on them.
I just want to say it's been 2 straight days that I've been in a space and we talked about coaching and schemes and the delta between HBCUs versus PWIs. Yesterday we talked about it at the D1 level.
Yep.
Yeah. Dave, were you in that HBCU nightly?
Yeah, I'm a co-host for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a co-host for it.
Okay, man. I'm glad to have you on. One of the things that they brought up last night too, one of the point was the officiating in those games as well. You talk about last year, Albany State being one of the more disciplined teams in the conference. Then that flag, that flag hurt them in that West Georgia game. I do agree with Stephen when they say about we have to overcome. And one of our earlier spaces, I was talking about some of the things that I learned from Tuskegee's first time. The first two attempts that we had in the playoffs, we lost by 3 points, a 3-point game to West Georgia at home, the 3-point game to North Alabama in Florence. And we had to adjust. And we had a coach that had D2 playoff experience. You know, he had won a couple of D2 national championships as offensive coordinator at North Alabama. And even if you go back and you watch some of his interviews and some of the things that he said, he was talking about how he has to go back and there's some things he has to teach his guys. You know, it's one of those learning curve things. And by this being Benedict's first go at the D2 playoffs, I'm not really, you know, going hard on them because it is a learning curve. We have to learn that, hey, there is a way that we have to approach the game when we are playing those teams, because unfortunately that's been around. Even when you go back and you study history, even integration, when we would play some of these schools, you know, it is a systemic issue. It is an issue that has existed for quite some time, and it's something that we have to start preparing for because we know that is the case. And if whenever we're fed up with it, and then maybe we'll start and look into those ideas as they were talking about, those spaces where we do value a HBCU playoff and those types of things. But somebody was going to say something.
I could tell you a quick story that happened a few weeks back. This happened near the beginning of the season. Right after the A&T South Carolina State game, we had one of the quarterbacks that got injured in that game. They came into our spaces and we asked a question about the penalties, but there was a lot of penalties in that game against South Carolina State. And what pretty much it boiled down to was that he kind of explained like the differences between like the MVC ref, the Missouri Valley refs versus the Big South refs versus the MEAC refs. And it was an interesting delta across the board about how they officiate. So it's just a matter of adjustment based on what conference the refs come from.
Yeah, I'll say this too. I do know for the D2 games, understand too that these playoff games are NCAA games. So they may be hosted on one of our campuses, but the NCAA fully runs those games. So in terms of, you know, which officiating crew is going to be assigned, that's an NCAA decision. The institutions have no say into, you know, which conference, you know, the officials are going to come from and that kind of thing. Totally different from you know, a regular season game or our conference championship or that kind of thing. Do understand, again, this is a completely an NCAA game from, you know, operations and everything. It's NCAA.
Hey, President, I when you were talking about when they start talking about officiating, man, y'all really should have 6 wins. And you know that hurts me to say because I am a Slater loyalist, but
Man, you
y'all really
know,
should have 6
don't
wins,
don't
dog.
don't even make me go there. I'm trying to be good on this space tonight, so don't even make me go there.
Oh man, anybody got anything else they want to say about Benedict before we jump over? Because I do want to talk about we have a coaching opening in the SIAC at one of our marquee institutions at Morehouse. But I want to make sure if anybody got anything else to say about the playoffs. And
I'll just say again, from the perspective of a president, I just think it's phenomenal the season that Benedict had. I know we've talked about the fact that we will be moving to an 8-game schedule, and you know, a strong Benedict to go along with what some of the traditional powers have been in the conference, you know, on the whole, just strengthens our conference. So I'm excited for what Benedict is doing. I'm excited for, you know, what all of our programs are doing, and I'm telling y'all, don't sleep on these Edward Waters University Tigers. We in Florida. We got speed for days, so don't sleep on us. But I'm excited about just the overall, I think, advancing strength of our conference, and I really think the best days are ahead of us.
Hey, President, they had y'all finishing 6th in the league, man. Y'all finished 4th, so y'all definitely on the uptrend.
Yeah, they were tripping. We're gonna learn a few of them to keep disrespecting us. Just wait on it. We getting there.
I was really impressed this year with Coach Morgan and Coach Keaton at Allen had some tough losses, at the beginning of the season. But one thing about it, they kept fighting. I
Yep.
I kept telling people like that Allen team and that Edward Waters team, they kept fighting through the season. I mean, you couldn't tell that they hadn't won a game when you would go out and play them. And so it was just, one of those things. I'm like, they're going to get somebody every week. I would like, hey, this might be the week because you never could count those guys out. And of course, that's testament to your commitment. We can tell your commitment by even the type of coaches that you have down there. So all the best to you. I want you to be the best, but not better than Tuskegee.
No doubt about it. Well, I'm excited for our program. Coach Morgan and his staff are doing a great job. The young men that we're bringing in. I mean, we're in a position where we're building our program. So for us to have gotten 5 wins this year, should have been 6. But like I said, we won't talk about that. I have to keep my president's hat on. I can't really talk about that. But we should have been 6. But we're looking forward to next year and doing even better as the years go forward. So we're excited. And again, I'm excited for our conference. For Lane to go and beat Tennessee State, Tuskegee, for Fort Valley to have the year it had, Albany State, of course, Tuskegee. This Savannah State. I mean, again, I think that the arrow is pointing in the right direction for our conference on the whole. And so again, I'm just excited.
Absolutely. I took some heat early on in the week because I tweeted out that Morehouse should hire Ray Lewis, and I really didn't add context to that. As many of you know, Morehouse years, and just looking back over the program history, D2 hadn't been too kind to Morehouse. Freeman had a few good years, basically like its first 4. And then it's kind of been up and down. And I have been someone to beat the horn and say that if Morehouse ever gets competitive in the conference, I think that will strengthen our conference just because of the Morehouse brand. I'm always talking about from a brand standpoint as it comes down to Tuskegee and the Morehouse. And I just, when I looked at the attendance for the Tuskegee Morehouse Classic this year, the attendance was set at like 2,000. Talking about a game that used to draw 25, 30,000 people in Columbus, in Birmingham, now getting 2,000 people. Now, of course, people say, well, take it back to Columbus. Well, the attendance has started to slack in Columbus as well. And I was saying that I think we should take it back to the campuses to try to rebuild that rivalry, thing. I think some of that rivalry is because Tuskegee has been so dominant in that game, and Morehouse has just been bad, for a lot of years. So they have an opportunity now to hire a coach. Morehouse is one of those institutions that you really don't get a lot of documents that we can get on other schools to kind of know their financials and what they're kind of putting out into their program. There was some talk this year they had cut scholarships. I don't know how true that is. So some people question what is their commitment to sports. I know sometimes we talk about their team, we talk about their rigor to get into their school, but that when I researched that Wingate school, I realized that they have a really rigorous process for admission as well. So you look at what their GPA requirements to get into that school, and to get into a school like Morehouse or Clark or Tuskegee. So it's like it kind of almost makes that excuse kind of invalid, especially when they're dominating our conference with a lot of talent from Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey, I
Any thought?
want to say this real quick, D2, man. I know you tweeted that on Monday, and I was on HBCU Post. Every now and then I scroll through, and I saw that several of the aggregation pages for the AUC started throwing around the chatter that Ray Lewis is a a serious contender. And I asked, I said, hey, is this a report? Because I want to put this up on Pulse, and this is true, or at least give some traction. And they said nothing. It's nothing official yet. So like they're talking about it. I mean, I don't know if a Ray Lewis would work. I mean, in theory, you want to try it, but you're coming off that Deion Sanders blueprint. Like, there's a reason why Deion Sanders worked, because it's Deion Sanders, like one of the best athletes of all time, charismatic, clean cut. Like with Ray Lewis, of course, you have like the past that you have to deal with, especially within Atlanta. But he's gonna be graded on the Deion Sanders sort of mold, especially with it being Morehouse. Like Jackson State has a prestige of football. You have Morehouse that doesn't necessarily have that athletic prestige, but that's Dr. King's school. That's Senator Warnock school. So people know about Morehouse. So I want to see it for the SIAC and for Morehouse. But if that really is true and there's real steam behind them getting Ray Lewis, I just don't know how it will work. And people would have to give him, at the very least, if they don't come out the gate swinging, 2 to 3 seasons in what's going to be, if he comes next year, it's going to be like a tough SIAC. You got Benedict that just was undefeated, and they're going to be back. You got Fort Valley, you got Albany, you got Tuskegee, you got Edward Waters. It ain't going to be as easy. It's not going to be like how it was for Jackson State in the SWAC. It's going to be a little bit different.
I agree with you on that front. But for a program that's as dead as Morehouse's program is, you have to splash some type of life in that. They could go out and make a hire. I know that they were talking about they were talking about keeping Copeland, make him head coach. I know a lot of the former football players, they really want that to happen. And they were also talking about one of the assistants that's at Rice. He used to coach at Alabama, not Alabama, at Morehouse. So those were two of the guys that they were, talking about. If you go back to when they made Doug Williams head coach, even though he only stayed a season and then he left and he goes to Grambling. You look at their hires and you say, like, okay, what has been the thought process behind their hiring? I understand what you're saying about the coaching standpoint. It's going to be who he surrounds himself with, but that's any coach. That's with Deion too. Surrounding yourself with quality coaches, experienced coaches that also know the lay of the land, and it's just the excitement that you could kind of breathe life. Like that program needs a breath of fresh air at this point.
But my question would be this: like, is the breath of fresh air Ray Lewis, or is the breath of fresh air a coach that can really get that program together? Because I think that when we look at Deion Sanders, we look at Hugh Jackson, we look at Eddie George, like when we look at those names, those are athletes. Like if you look at Coach Berry, for example, Coach Berry had a great pedigree, first at Southern. He comes to Benedict and he goes undefeated. Like I think we want the splash higher and sometimes that celebrity factor of like Ray Lewis, and we don't go for, hey, the coach that can really truly build up the program and develop like that. That's what I really want to see Morehouse have a discussion of. Do you want a coach that's going to really develop that program, start a culture, build a tradition like Coach Berry, like that 1-0 culture and tradition? Or do you want that coach that's going to get you headlines and say, hey, I'm pulling these recruits and these transfers to Morehouse? Then like he leaves and now it's like, well, Morehouse is like Cleveland when LeBron left. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you have to weigh that. I think Morehouse could win it if they just get a coach that can instill the right tradition, that knows how to coach, that brings in the right coaching staff, and just really gets those recruits. Because Morehouse in this Atlanta, like I feel like they have to really think about that. The alumni, the students, the stakeholders, they have to really think about that. But I wouldn't be mad if they got Ray Lewis. There has to be a conversation.
Ray Lewis' son played at Virginia Union. So, I mean, that might be something he might be interested in definitely getting into, is looking at D2 football. Either way whenever you look at Morehouse, you got to always look at the fact that it is. Some of those people, guys, players that go there, you know, they may not want to play football for years. Because again, a lot of those guys that go to Morehouse, you know, they jobs and careers that they looking forward to being in, you know, I think that a lot of that trumps what they do on the football field. Like I really feel like football would be, you know, second or third in those guys' lives. And I think that's the one thing that they're gonna have to get over. That's the hump that they're gonna really have to get over to make that program successful. Is getting guys in there that really want to be there, a part of the program, 100% bought into that, and not so focused on the future and just focused on the right now, which would be their football career. So I think that's something, you know, that they're gonna have to get over with that program.
The only thing I would say as a rebuttal to that, and I think we talked about it a few weeks ago, is that you got the Ivy League and you got like good football teams in the Ivy League, like, and they're not like ranked in the FCS like that. I don't think, but like I think Yale has been pretty good. You had like Harvard that's had good years, so it's like that's the same thing that Yale and Harvard go through, and we call Morehouse the Black Ivy League. I mean, you can get guys that are smart and they want to ball. I mean, like I thought, like I don't think that much of an impediment as we would think. Then the elephant in the room for real is that last season, and I know we talked about it ad nauseum these past few weeks, but Morehouse was good last year. Like they were really good, not this year, but last year. Like they beat Fort Valley. I think they might have won the Morehouse Tuskegee Classic. I'm not sure. I have to check that. But they like I said, they had the game of the year against Albany. Like they had games and just those players left and it just sort of cratered, and then they beat Clark Atlanta this year. So like I feel like it's just like they catch lightning in the bottle like every couple of years and then it dissipates. I feel like you got to bring in someone that can continue to keep that magic going.
I look at Morehouse and I look at Howard and I think they're kind of in the same boat historically, at least recently, the recent history over the last 30 years or so. And if you look at Howard, what they did was after they had Coach Flea, and after that situation wasn't going to work anymore, they went for a name. They got Mike London, and just so happened he struck lightning in the bottle. They got Kalen Newton to come. Well, Kalen Newton was already there. Um, and then they were able to win that game against UNLV and get a lot of excitement. They were only 500 under Mike London, but it was Mike London. It was a chance for him to reset himself up in coaching again, and he left after a couple years, right? So then they went after another coach that had a name, and that was the coach that didn't last. He only lasted 6 games because there's some accusations of how he was mistreating his players. Some allegations that he had faced at other places. Um, all the while, Damon Wilson, and the same thing over at Morgan State. All the while, Damon Wilson from Bowie State is sitting there right under their noses. Um, and so, you look at Howard. Eventually, they ended up getting Coach Larry Scott, who's been at the FBS level. But he seems like he's there for the long haul, and I think those schools, because of their academics, they do have a certain culture that makes them kind of unique within the HBCU world on a certain level, being private and having those high standards. But they found, it seems like they finally found the right coach, as well as Morgan State as well. So I think for Morehouse, they have to find somebody who embraces everything that Morehouse is academically, and can go into people's houses and sell them on that. And then they also need somebody, it sounds like, to fundraise, that can come in and help them fundraise. Um, again, as D2 said, we don't really know what their financial situation is, but usually when a program like that has issues, there's usually some issues about how they're financing. You know what I mean? Either do they have enough scholarships? Are they do they have a recruiting budget? All of that type of thing. And I would think that Morehouse, as much money as it gets for academics, I think the right coach could come in and pull the right strings and get them some funding
find some funding, some causes, and some funding to get them their program more of what they need. Because it just it seems like it's very much so put on the back burner.
Yeah, if I could just say this real quickly, I just want to reiterate. I know you all are talking about coaches, but it starts at the top. I'm gonna use Tuskegee as an example. Tuskegee is what I think latest USN News and World Report #3 HBCU in the nation. So I mean they're right up. I mean Black Ivy the same way as Morehouse. But I tell you what, you go a couple seasons with 2 or 3 wins at Tuskegee, you're gonna have a problem. I mean it's a culture. It's what that institution values. You know what I mean? So I'll leave it at that. I know we're talking about coaches, but every institution has a culture. And it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. You could be a highly selective academic institution and also be a very strong athletic and a very strong football program as well. But it depends upon, again, what is the culture of that institution. And I use Tuskegee as an example. Again, very highly ranked, selective, high academic institution, but also you gotta win football games at Tuskegee, or it's gonna be a problem. So again, it's what that particular institution values. So I think you have to really be fair to coaches. You have to be fair to coaching staffs, because again, they're not the ones that drive resources and the success of programs. And I'll keep reiterating that as an administrator that loves athletics, understand where the power lies and where the resources come from. I'll leave it at that.
You're either going to care about sports or you're not going to care about sports. That's what it boils down to. And if the leadership there don't care, those are the results you're going to get. Because I think for a long time, I don't know, and I said in the past when Stephen talked about Howard, I don't know if Howard cared too much about football for a long time. Because I think the perception about Howard was they just weren't good at sports, and that's false. They just wasn't good at football. So if Morehouse is in a state where they don't care about football, they could make a different type of decision.
Also, man, what I just want to say on the coaching hiring thing, man, one thing I asked for is the recycle coaches. Like, I don't think the SIAC is kind of known for recycling coaches, and I don't want to talk down or talk bad on any coach that may be in here or whatnot, but I think the SIAC got to really do their homework, and some of these institutions get lazy and just hire a coach that just maybe got fired from another institution, just because of what he may have done in the past or whatnot. I think it's some good coordinators in the SIAC. Also, I think it's some good coaches, at the Division I level also, that just, they get, like you say, they get the Morehouse. They can do some stuff. I don't know too much about the Ray Lewis thing. I know I kind of played early on Twitter when I seen about the Morehouse job being open, and I said, man, Willie Taggart, that just got, from FAU. I know it didn't work out there, but this is some new blood. This is a new type. Like, this is a X's and O type guy that I think he would love to come back to kind of restore his coaching foundation. I think Morehouse would be a good platform for him to get his name back out there and get it going, kind of like what Hugh Freeze had to do when he went to Liberty. So I just think that's something that Morehouse really need to look into. But like I say, it's not, not the same Willis Taggart is the answer, because hell, there may be some good coordinators on these D2 SIAC teams that maybe can, ignite that program. But I just don't want to see none of these. I think it needs to be some young blood, some new blood coming into some of these SIAC schools, younger coaches. And that's all I have on that.
Well, I want to say this because I think I quote tweeted that I like Taggart better than Ray Lewis. I'm not gonna hold you, because he has a record of success. If he wants to rebuild his reputation, what better place than Morehouse? Like, this isn't a school where it's like, well, I gotta go there and I gotta suffer. You're in Atlanta. It's Morehouse. Then, like the whole entire thing. Okay, we got to fundraise. We got to raise money. It's Morehouse. We talk about, well, the football players, they're trying to be rocket scientists, so we don't know if they'll play. It's Morehouse. Like, some of them alum are like millionaires. Like, they need to tap in. Like, what's up?
Yes.
Like, tap in, make it happen.
And even like you say, from the Ray Lewis standpoint, or even Willie Taggart, I think you get the best of both worlds when you talk about him tapping into his resources, kind of what Dion has done at Jackson State. Of course, Dion has built that thing through some of his NFL buddies. They have this thing to where I think a few of his buddies just donated $100, like the first 100 days to hit, for Jackson State for the football program. I don't know if Ray Lewis can do that. I'm pretty sure he can, especially when you talk about his Miami connection. Willie Taggart know a lot of, assistants, a lot of former players. Hey man, this is what's going on. Can we get, because like the president at Edward Waters, he talk about raising money and fundraising. So that's the big aspect you got to look at. Raising money for the athletic program, because like you say, they took away some of their scholarships. What other better way to try to get some of that money back by bringing in someone that can raise or get people to donate to the school because of that coach, as I should say. So I
Ray
think that's.
Lewis gonna bring the cameras. He gonna bring ESPN. He gonna get. He
You
gonna
think
bring.
so? How
But
much? How much do you think
what?
is Eddie George doing that at Tennessee State?
But to be fair, ESPN's already there because they got a
Buzz.
contract. They got a contract.
Yeah.
Eddie George ain't the same. Eddie George ain't Deion Sanders either.
No. I'm talking about. He said Ray Lewis
But
bringing
he
the
ain't
camera. I
Ray
said
Lewis
that's not a
either.
guarantee.
Ray's different. Like there's certain guys that are more
True.
passive than others.
You're
But
right. You're right.
but at the same time, like the SIAC has a deal with ESPN, and then Morehouse is Morehouse. So CNN was coming on campus before Ray Lewis was even considered. Like they did a whole special on Morehouse's academics. So if it's a football player, of a football coach that comes in and gets Morehouse back right, like Morehouse is great at messaging. So CNN is going to be like, hey, the school of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is good at football. So on Dr. King's Day, let's spotlight his school and his football program.
Yes.
They don't need Ray Lewis for
Let me say this. I don't know kind of the average age of the folks that are on this call, but I'm a native Atlantan, and there's a huge elephant in the room. You talk about bringing Ray Lewis to Atlanta. I'm gonna leave that today. If you don't know about it,
big elephant.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me just
somebody got
be
shot
real
up.
honest. I'm a native Atlantan, and I don't see Ray Lewis coming to Morehouse in Atlanta. Let me just say that.
Yeah, you're right, man.
That's a pretty valid point there, sir.
President. But you got to understand, Ray Lewis from Polk County, Florida, man. I can see it happening.
So he could go to FAMU if Willie Simmons get an FBS job.
Facts.
He ain't going to Atlanta. I forgot.
Yeah, because the first thing that's going to come out is the new is they're going to rehash everything that happened back in 2000. I mean,
when Ray Lewis went to the Super Bowl in his final season, they did a whole 10-minute montage about it.
Exactly. Like y'all can say all of that all you want to, but it is what it is, and it just that's a part of the baggage that comes along with him. And I know we have a president on the line. I know one thing that I was told by a veteran reporter a couple years back that the biggest thing with some, and I think it's I'm glad you were transparent about the presidents and then being responsible for what's going on with athletics, especially in the football program, since it's kind of the front porch. I think a lot of people, it's good that some folks are starting to understand that and embrace it. But I was told a long time back that the one thing the presidents don't want out of athletics is headaches. Is more headaches. It is more headaches and more fires to put out. Some folks who aren't as who don't see it quite as President Dr. Faison sees it. They're at the bottom line, at the lowest level that they want out of athletics is they don't want unnecessary attention or problems that they have to step in, fix, or answer to. So
let me chime in real quick. But what if this could be looked at as a debt, paying a debt to society? I mean, I understand where y'all coming from with it.
That's what I was just about to say.
What if the storyline changes? I got in trouble. Yeah, this situation happened, but look at what I'm doing now. And I think that's the way Ray Lewis has moved his life from that incident.
Nah.
But he ain't in Atlanta though.
He ain't in Atlanta, man. It's different if you in the
somebody
city.
Lost whatever happened, somebody lost their life, right? You know what I mean? Like and to come back in the backyard, like that's
And
Yeah.
It's going to be something
what I'll
that's
say
that's
too,
going to overshadow all that. Like, even if it's a good decision from a coaching standpoint to get the image for the school, that's going to be something that Morehouse is going to have, or any HBCU in that area would have to carry with them the entire way as long as he's there.
and also what I'll say too is that narratives are powerful. So imagine if you have like a Fox News or ESPN and these different outlets, blogs, and these are websites that are talking about that, where the whole entire thing is, hey, Ray Lewis is hired. He has a questionable history in Atlanta, and you have Morehouse who is pretty image conscious. If you look at it, they're pretty image conscious. So you want to have to put out not only athletics but the PR department. You want to have to put out those fires of having
Y'all
to
don't have a
answer
big
that?
enough. Y'all don't have Morehouse doesn't have a big enough budget for their PR department and what they would have to deal with if they have Ray Lewis as their coach there in Orlando.
Exactly.
They don't have it.
Athletically, again, if we're being transparent, they don't even have a right now. They don't even have a sports information director. They don't
Ooh.
have they don't have a sports information director. And again, as Dr. Faison was saying, so much of athletics is the infrastructure. From what outside looking in there, from what I've seen, there's a lot of infrastructure there, despite that Morehouse name, basic things that they are lacking. And so until they fix those things, it's just little things like that it may not seem like a big deal to most people, but I mean, there's a ways to go.
It's
So
about what's the priority.
I'm always fussing about the conference website. A lot of our
Oh dear
schools,
God, I'm trying to put together an All-American team and a defense and a Player of the Year, and they're not giving me anything.
a lot of our schools don't have sports information director. I mean, Tuskegee went a long time before we got the one that we have now. We went a long time. That was one of the excuses behind how things went down with Coach Slater. I was like, but that's inexcusable in my opinion. Still, but when you start talking about these invites to these showcase games, like the Pigskin Bowl, you start seeing like the people on these committees, they start tweeting out like, hey, what good does it for a player at Clark who they only had the stats updated for 2 games, and it's the end of the season, and then they finally put in at the last minute when the invites are already out, and so it kind of puts it kind of puts our schools at disadvantage. And today's point, when somebody tweeted me back and said Ray Lewis couldn't survive that first week, from what it would happen from a PR standpoint. And I agreed with them because you would have to get on top of that narrative. And we've seen too many times that our HBCUs, like, we don't get on top of narratives before so I know one that big, we definitely wouldn't get on top of it, because it would be something that has to be really thought out at the university before you go out and make that hire. And so, like, I have been seeing Ray Lewis' name circulate. So if it does happen, I mean, I really hope that they have really thought that thing through and really put some effort into getting out in front, if you can, as best you can. So I 100% agree. Like, it would be rough on them to
But
make that hire.
here's another caveat. Even if it did happen, and people are expecting the Dion effect that with Ray Lewis, you're not going to get that because he's probably going to have to stay quiet with all the media attention that he's going to get. You don't want him out front at that point. So it's not going to get the same effect. And then you don't even know if he can coach.
Exactly. You don't know if he can coach.
And put together a staff. I think that's the other thing too. Dion has been coaching. He has been, he's been eyeing this for a while. So I think he knows. I think people just are think people are just thinking you can plug and play, and I just don't think it's going to work like that everywhere. Eddie George. I think the jury is still out on that. I mean, Tennessee State has been, a middle of the road program for a long time. But I do think next year will be his third full year. So next year we'll definitely we'll see what he can do. But I think it's
I
I
think
just
Morehouse got to make a big splash though with something. They gotta
They
They
don't.
got
No,
to
they
ignite some
don't.
type of energy.
They really don't.
They need a coach. Get a good coach. You don't have to make a splash.
And that was the thing, like with Fort Valley, like when Fort Valley brought in Coach Sean Gibbs, a lot of folks were questioning it. Like we brought in, he didn't have head coach experience, and look at us, like we were second behind Benedict. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like you just got to get someone that's good that can win.
but
So
Fort Valley,
when before Morgan State hired Damon Wilson, there was speculation that Ray Lewis had an opportunity to get that job too, and I think they made the right decision going with Damon Wilson.
Right.
Get somebody that can
I'm
coach.
yeah, I get that. Like I'm saying, yes, they need to know how to coach, but also you can't put Morehouse program on the Fort Valley level. Like it's levels too, like you say with this coaching. Like Morehouse need for one, yes, a good X and O guy, but they also need a guy to come in some kind of way, ignite the alumni, the non-athletic alumni, some kind of way to make them to give money to the alumni program. Because once again, the guy spoke early on about Howard not being known as a good sports school, and he said no, it's just football. Well, I can't name a sport outside of the men's basketball team here and there that was
The
fairly
women,
decent.
the women's went to the NCAA tournament last year. They got a pretty good track team too. They got some good sports in the at Howard, other than basketball. I mean, other than football.
Well, they're not good in football to me. And
Oh
They
no,
I
they've
haven't
mean,
been
they
been
are
to
the
the
better.
co-champions.
they
They're
haven't
the
been to the
They're
co-champions.
co-champions right
NCAA.
now, though.
They haven't been to the NCAA in 30 since the George H.W. Bush era. Basketball, they've made some splashes, but they've not. They can't get out of MEAC.
who are we talking about? We talking about Howard?
Howard.
Oh,
The
yeah,
men,
no.
the men's are
He
making.
was talking about Morehouse, but yeah.
I was
Oh,
talking
gotcha.
about
Okay.
Morehouse.
Oh, okay, gotcha. My
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah.
All
I
right.
was saying I didn't know if the guy said that Howard wasn't good in all sports, but they was good in certain sports. But I'm saying Morehouse, I can't name a sport that is just like like they're gonna be at the top of the conference every year in contention for, you know what I'm saying, the championship. So
But the
what's
part I'm like, why are we forgetting last year though? Like last year they were good. Like they were beating nearly everybody. They started off 0-3 and they ended up like in a really good spot. And if they beat Albany, they're in the SIAC championship, I
but
think.
you're talking about 1 year out of how many years?
Okay.
And I would just like I say, I'm talking about when you talking about getting these boosters that's not didn't play athletics to give to, want more money to go towards athletics, because now we're saying that, hey, we want to build our athletic program up now because look what this coach is doing or what he can do for us.
Yeah, and I
Because
want to say another thing too, really quickly, because I just thought about it. Morehouse has a really good basketball team for sure. Their
the
basketball team is
boys,
like,
that's why I said the boys, that's why I said the boys team here and there be in contention for the SIAC conference championship here and there. That's the one program. That's what I was talking about.
yeah,
I think y'all kind of thought I was talking about
yeah,
Howard at the
you're
Well,
time.
right.
when you said boys, I think you kind because Morehouse doesn't have a women's team.
Yeah,
I think that
Well,
kind of
yeah,
coincides.
they don't
Yeah,
have women, but I'm saying they
yeah.
have
My
other
bad, man.
sports.
I'll own
Yeah,
that. I'll own that one.
yeah. But they have other sports besides football and men's basketball. But like you say, nothing is not good because for one, like at Morehouse, it's one of them schools to where the DB coach may be the track coach. Uh, the 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 softball, I don't know, the male cheerleader coach may be the volleyball. I don't know, but I know Morehouse is
But
not
pretty
pretty.
sure they operate like that.
in that case, we got to have a separate discussion, man. I think that becomes an accountability issue on what the administration wants.
There you
Like
go.
you're talking like
The
they don't want an
president was
athletic
saying
program.
too.
Period.
Yeah, like you say, that's what the president talk about. That really comes from your administrator. But like you say, you make that hire to have everybody like, oh snap, Morehouse got this coach.
Yeah,
Like,
they sound like that.
like
It sounds like they want to be Spellman.
I
No,
mean,
no athletics.
I'm
Let's
just
yeah,
say this
saying that's what
about
it sounds like. Like based on what you just said, tells me they just have it here because they're tolerating it. They don't
yeah.
want it there. And if they don't want
It's
it there, they can fix that. It's not hard.
But
They can have a committee. They can do a little committee to have a
well,
debate on whether or not to
but
get
but
rid of the entire
but
athletic
I tell
People
you
program.
will
this though,
raise hell
they
though
put a
if
lot
they
of
stop.
money.
yeah,
But listen, they put a lot of money into the football program this past spring. Like, if you've been to Morehouse in the last couple of years, you go there now. Like for one, they got the brand new field turf.
They got the brand new scoreboard. The bleachers has been, kind of resurfaced a little bit. It's still the same, but the press boxes, inside of the press boxes, has been done over. So they're showing where they want to make a commitment to football. Now you got to go make that hire as your next head football coach, and that's kind of why I think they got rid of Coach Freeman, because, like you said, you just said last year they almost won the SIAC, so he didn't do nothing to get in no trouble. So you mean to tell me, oh, we're gonna fire him this year, even though after last year we're not known as football, but we almost won the conference with him?
Well, he did go 1-10, so it was like, let's get him out of here.
About those facilities though, we do have to recognize that money was gifted. A lot of that was gifted to
Oh yeah.
Morehouse by the Honey Badger Project by Willie Lanier, who
Oh,
has
and it was
been
gifted
doing.
by some NFL players that trains there as well, with Quincy Avery. Quincy Avery donated some money there.
Right. So it's they had some help there, but I mean, again, there's a lot of gaps, as you were saying, coaches playing multiple roles
Yeah.
outside of that. Going through a whole football season without a sports information director. I mean, these are just people that in 2022 you have to have, and and unfortunately, a lot of our schools, especially at the Division II level, are just getting by without it in an age where, as Dr. Faison said, a lot of folks want to do stuff with HBCUs, but we don't even have the infrastructure to really take advantage of it. A lot of our schools, just for so many reasons.
Like, it's no reason why, to me, like, I'm glad Coach Barry is doing what he's doing at Benedict, because when you talk about going to a university that's in the city, or HBCU that's in the city lifestyle, you talk about Clark, Atlanta, and Morehouse being downtown Atlanta. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to get any recruit just from the state of Georgia, period, that don't really go to your FBS or your FCS school. Like, they really should have Georgia on lock. But once again, it's about making that right hire. Because Clark, Atlanta, and Morehouse, like you say, man, it's in the heart of Atlanta, man. People from everywhere comes to Atlanta. Like, if you haven't been to Atlanta yet, then I don't know what to say about you. But a lot of people ain't been to Tuskegee. A lot of people ain't going down to Fort Valley, Georgia. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's Atlanta.
Let me say this about Morehouse, and I do want to touch on Kentucky State's coaching situation before we get off here. From the perception that I've gotten, from several coaches that have coached at Morehouse over the years, a lot of people talk to me about stuff, just off the record. A lot of them just tend to feel that people liked Coach Freeman at Morehouse. And what I was interpreting as them being uninterested in their program, they have came to me and said, "No, you're wrong. They just like Coach Freeman that much." When you talk about that season last year, Randall, Morehouse act like they had never seen a football until they got to Birmingham and played us in that Tuskegee Morehouse Classic. They were 0-4 coming to that game, and I remember calling the DB coach, the former DB coach at Morehouse, and saying, "Hey, dog, we're gonna lose this game." I went into that game saying we're gonna lose that game. He said, "No way, man, no way, Tuskegee lose that game." Yeah, we're gonna lose this game because it was just in the air, and Morehouse tend to like they got it together because their defense was strong. They had a really strong defense, and you can see like with Miles, even though Miles is a 1-9 team this year, their defense had them in just about every game, to go and win. So that Morehouse defense has been solid. It's that offense that's been questionable. And so when the offensive coordinator left and went to Alabama State and he took some of their offensive weapons with him, I said, "Oh man, they're really tied with their hands behind their back this year." And it had been circulating through the summer. A couple guys had already told me that they had already told him, like, if he doesn't get over 500, this was it. And you watch as that season go along, it's just like they knew it was the end. So this hire is going to be interesting to me from whichever angle that they come from with it. And I just hope that they give him the resources to be successful, whoever they hire, because I hate seeing guys come into programs, even when I hear about Clark just not giving their full allotment of scholarship. You know how many decent men, decent coaches, good coaches that have come through Clark that could have built that program had they given them the resources. So, we filter through a lot of coaches, but like the president said, if it starts in that administration. So I just hope whoever they hire, that they give them the tools they need to be successful in the conference. And that's a good segue into the Kentucky State because it's interesting over there. I remember hitting Steven up earlier in the year when I first started getting the information that hey, their head coach is out. And when I was talking to a few people, they was like, "No way." I'm saying, "Man, listen, it's getting bad there," because I was also reading in the paper where basically a lot of members in their state legislature was basically saying just close the university down. And I'm like, and that was growing. That was a growing concern. It kind of went under the radar. And when they finally came up with this bailout package, I remember reading something there where like they can't even spend $1,000 without getting approval from this specific committee that the legislature deemed, to go through their finances. Like I'm saying, man, it was bad. So when you get to the SIAC media day, and you see the AD, and some of the people questioning him, like, okay, if you got the interim tag, are you gonna be on the sidelines, not be on the sidelines? He didn't really answer, and so that's why you see, like on my page, I'm always lifting Kentucky State up because their coaches were complaining that they didn't even have balls to practice with this particular year. So it's gonna be really interesting what happens at Kentucky State because this is a team that just 2 years ago knocked off Jackson State. They were trending upward. They were right there last year, could have won the SIAC themselves. And just to see them, fall to where they are is something that concerns me. And when we start talking about the conference as a whole, we have to pay attention to those things because if we turn a blind eye, it could be either one of our institutions.
That's true, but like one thing I want to say that's interesting. I'm looking through their football schedule. They were 7-4 last year, and they played a competitive game against Savannah State. They beat Benedict. They beat Lane. They played a competitive game against Miles. They played a competitive game against Tuskegee. Like, what was 2021? Because 2021 seemed like an odd year because it's like Kentucky State was good last year, 7-4. Miles was good last year. So like, is 2021 an aberration? Or is it like, hey, there's something that's there, but it's like it just didn't sustain this year,
Coming off that COVID year.
True.
Yeah, I think one thing too is going to be interesting. Again, as we're only talking about, just a couple of programs looking at coaches this year, is for our HBCUs is how are we what is our hiring process for our athletic departments, especially at the football and basketball um, programs, because I follow a good guy for folks to follow if they don't already is his name is Matt Brown. He has a newsletter called Extra Points, and he's done and he has a newsletter, also a podcast, and it talks about the different ways that search committees that a lot of the Power Five and really Division I schools overall, some of our HBCUs aren't using them as much, but having different search firms to go out there that they have on retainer, and of course that costs money, and so a lot of our schools don't have the money for that. But figuring out some system, and I know people are always complaining about the hiring guys that have been there before. I think it would behoove us to understand how our programs are doing their coaching services. Because I don't know if you guys remember last year, Savannah State, when their coach left in December, they didn't make a hire until it was already time. It was already spring ball time, right? And so it took them, it took them almost 5 months. And the AD is came on during the introductory press conference and is getting questions, and he's like, basically saying how they didn't even start looking at application. They didn't even post the job until, the beginning of the year. And then they didn't start looking at applications until the end of this time or whatever. And it's like, I understand why a lot of our programs are so, or a lot of our people are so shook up about, Deion Sanders having conversations with Colorado early in the season. I'm sorry, well, during the season or whatever. But it's like, we got to understand, like, with these coaching hires now, we got to be positioned to move quicker than we have done before, and also, also make our searches a little more extensive, and not just, well, let's just see who does the application. Like, you know what I mean? I just think I think everybody who is in a booster club or wants to do a booster club, or just support should ask questions of the athletic directors, like, you know, how are we keeping up with the coaching cycles? And if our coach happens to go somewhere else, what's our plan of operation? Because unfortunately, a lot of times we're either operating by the seat of our pants or too slow. And by that point, the coaching, the picking seems slim to none, because you don't really know where to look. So you just grab who has done some things in the past and you may have a relationship with. And so I think that's something that everybody should looking forward should ask their ads and their presidents too, as far as, just what's our plan for what's next, because everybody gets comfortable in the now, but eventually the next always comes.
Definitely. That's one of the things. Even when I look at our women's basketball coach, and I'm pretty sure that we may not have her that long. And so I'm always, talking like, doing what we can to keep her, but also like what's next, because outside of football, women's basketball is pretty much the next sport that I follow a lot in the conference. And the Tuskegee women's basketball program, after Coach Roby stepped down, we had some really dark days. You talking about over a span of 5 years, we didn't even win 5 games. So, um, I definitely understand like that. What's next mentality. Even in some of the other spaces, like BJ space, somebody was saying that they pretty sure that even at a place like Jackson State, that their AD, probably already has a short list, or should have a short list of, who would follow behind, who they would want to target to follow behind a Dion. So those are like those things that we have to be mindful of, and act and just make sure, like you said, the conversations with our ads. Well, I'll say this, and I'm gonna turn it over and let everybody say their last little sayings. I watch Ole Miss and their NIL collective. The Grove is what it's called, and just how the guy who was kind of behind it, how he orchestrated it, and just having conversations with him about how they pulled together. When I think about Tuskegee, I think about our brand across the country. You look at things like Google Trend and just see like, where do people search our institutions from? How do we, as far from the athletic standpoint, how do we reach the person who may not can come to Tuskegee to a football game every weekend that stays in California? How can we make them involved in our programs and just being active on that forefront? But I'll let everybody say their goodbyes. I appreciate everybody coming out. We're gonna continue to do this. We're gonna talk some recruiting later on down the line. Um, I hate that the season's over with, the football season at least. But overall, it's been a good year, and I look forward to great things coming out of the SIAC in the future.
Yeah, I want to say first and foremost, like, thank you to everybody. This is amazing because, I see all the SWAC spaces, and the MEAC spaces. And of course, like I said, Steven does a great job with the CIAA spaces. But it's just great to, to speak about, SIAC business and, what we're doing in the conference, because, we're relevant and we're here. Of course, for me, you can follow You can follow HBCU Pulse on Instagram and on YouTube. We're streaming this on YouTube. If you want to check out the replay, and also the HBCU Pulse on Twitter and TikTok, and also watch us on HBCU League Pass Plus. And just to plug for League Pass Plus, if you do want to see that Benedict game, like for film or just to check out, the referee situation, you can watch that on demand on HBCU League Pass Plus. So you can go check that out too. But yeah, I appreciate everybody for coming out.
Yeah, again, man, it's a great space. Appreciate you guys joining us.
Stephen, any parting words?
Oh no, I mean, I just want to say shout out to y'all for doing this and holding it down. For sure, it's definitely valuable and needed. I know, the MEAC and the SWAC being Division One, they get their fair share of commentary, and then the CIAA being on the East Coast, they always get they get a light shine on them as well. But I definitely think it's great for you guys to have this and talk about the SIAC. And to grow that. So excited for you guys for doing that. Kudos to you. Hats off to you.
Appreciate everything that you do over at HBCU Game Day. And, we just keep the support. Dave, we appreciate you coming up. Anything you want to say?
No, I'm good, man. This is a good space. I have Benedict in my heart because I'm from that city. I'm from Columbia. I mean, my parents still live 10 minutes away from that campus. So it's always a soft spot for me. So I was really rooting for those guys in the playoffs. I was kind of bummed at the way that it ended. But keep doing what you're doing, man. Consistency is key when it comes to doing things like this. So, yeah, that's all I got.
I appreciate you for coming out. Dr. Faison, we appreciate it. All the knowledge, all the gems that you drop when you come on. Appreciate you. And shouts out to Edward Waters and the great things that's coming out of that institution athletically and academically. Y'all have a good night now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the SIAC Spaces on tonight. I was on mute. I'm so glad I wasn't, my microphone wasn't on because that would have been I would have been I can't even hear myself. But man, thank y'all so much for coming on. First and foremost, a lot of great comments that if I can, I want to read those comments. Let me pull them up. But that Ray Lewis conversation was interesting, and we're going to definitely clip that because I think, some good points were raised. But let me go to my phone to see if I can pull up the comments for, our conversation. All right. So let's talk about some things that you all were saying. So Jethro Mullet said it's the same issue with FCS HBCU teams. Overall coaching is lacking. Youth football offenses weaken the trenches and false confidence due to weak out of conference scheduling. I honestly do think that that's what happens with our best teams, because when you look at our best teams, they dominate, in conference. They dominate. And, when they play teams out of conference, like you saw Benedict, normally they score first. Benedict strikes first. I was surprised when, they struck first versus Albany, because Albany had such a dominant defense and they weren't allowing touchdowns from any of the teams they were playing in the last season, and even going into this season, outside of a FAMU. They weren't allowing any touchdowns from the teams that they were playing. So you have Benedict that runs out and goes 14-0. I'm like, yeah, this game is over because Benedict is taking the momentum. So when Wingate finally got that touchdown, I was like, yeah, I don't know how Benedict's going to come back from this. There's only one touchdown. Then they go up 14-0, and I'm like, yeah, this game's over. Because it's it's one thing to dominate the whole entire year. It's another thing to come out and then someone like D2HC football says, punches you in the mouth. And now you have to react to that, and you're not used to trailing. You're used to playing ahead. So I think that that's what honestly befalls us with a lot of our programs. We're dominant in our conference, but out of conference, we really go tit for tat with these teams. But my whole entire thing, and what I was saying in the space, I was speaking in the space, is that do we value culture or do we want to be good in white spaces? I'm someone that believes that we can brand ourselves in our football and so tell the story of our rivalries And I think that's going to get us media dollars. That's going to get sponsors to buy in with us. And I believe that that's going to get our fans to come out and support. Like, I personally believe that, and I'm not opposed to going to the playoffs, but we have to go there and win. Because I don't want us to go to the playoffs because we lose. like FAMU lost last year. Like Benedict, I love Benedict, they lost. You know, Fort Valley, I honestly believe if Fort Valley went, because we could have gone, I believe that we probably would have lost to one of those teams that was ranked, whether it was Delta State, whether it was I think whoever Limestone played, because Limestone wasn't ranked, they would have beaten us. We would have gotten beaten, honestly. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, if we're going to go into these football programs and we're going to play these white institutions, we got to win. And that's really the thing that, I really deal with. So y'all having a lot of love for the president. The president, Edward Waters, Albany State University alum. He is so amazing, and he brought so much. He always brings a lot to the spaces. He's been on about 2 or 3. FAMU losing to Jackson State 59-3 hurt them more than that lost to Albany State. And then also South Carolina State not being as good as an out-of-conference opponent, that also hurt them as well. And I just, as a media member and someone that has this platform with HBCU Pulse and being a Fort Valley State University alumni, I just did not rock with the talking point that, it was all Albany State's fault. No, it wasn't. Because they did not handle business, and I got love for FAMU. Like, honestly, my 2 favorite HBCUs, just for real. And I always say that if I didn't go to Fort Valley, I would have gone to either one of these 2 HBCUs, FAMU and Southern. It's FAMU and Southern for me. And I've been to both of their campuses, FAMU multiple times. When Fort Valley played Southern in 2017, I paid a pretty penny as a student, as a junior, to go to Baton Rouge with the alumni. We stayed in New Orleans. We went to Baton Rouge. Fort Valley actually didn't do bad that game. We were actually pretty good. We could get some points on the board. But it was just a great atmosphere. And I just really feel like, Southern and FAMU, that's my vibe. So, I rock with FAMU and Southern heavy, but FAMU didn't handle business. And that was the problem. Great season despite the odds, and they had a lot of players that were out. We did a report on it, but they didn't win, and it wasn't Albany State's fault for that. So let's talk about the Ray Lewis story, because I think that was something really quickly before we go that was interesting, because it was a lot of conversation on YouTube, and I want to take the time to acknowledge you all, because when we're talking on that Twitter space, and we're going to, of course, have more for recruiting, we're going to have more for basketball. So I really appreciate you all commenting, and I want to just say, I know I'm still talking, but I want to just say I see you all, and I appreciate you all for commenting. So Willie Tiger just got fired from Florida Atlantic University. He would be a great hire in HBCU. That's Jethro Mullet. I believe that would be a great hire, and it would be a better hire than Ray Lewis, because I think that what happens is you have Deion Sanders that's done so well at Jackson State. He pulls the number 1 recruit in Travis Hunter. He has Shador down there. That's a great quarterback, and it's his son. He's also got great transfers and other great recruits that people want to try to duplicate the process. You see Grambling hires Hugh Jackson. You see Tennessee State hires Eddie George. How has that worked out so far? And we got to give Hugh Jackson some time. We got to give him some time, because they had flashes of greatness this season, including against Jackson State, because they cut that lead to 17-21 going to halftime, and then they got blitzed in the second half. But how has that worked out? Now, I know we're talking about the SIAC, and that would be dynamic for our conference, but I believe that you want to bring your splash hire is bringing in a guy that can coach. That's your splash hire, a guy that can coach with the profile that coached at Florida Atlantic. And was it Florida International, Florida Atlantic? Wasn't Florida Atlantic the school that Shador was supposed to go to before he committed to Jackson State when Deion Sanders went over? I could be wrong. Could be Florida International, but I mean, why not try to get him? And he comes with less baggage. He's the actual coach. I think that you have a lot of recruits that will be amped up to play for him. I think that you'd have the alumni that would be excited for that, because you're getting a legitimate football coach. And I think he can bring in some good recruits and bring like a D1 type of mindset to D2. And I think that would be great. It'd be a great storyline. We would push that on HBCU Pulse. Steven would push it on HBCU Game Day. Like, I think that honestly would be great and it would be better than Ray Lewis. The only benefit of a Ray Lewis is the star power. But like I said, and I said that in the space, like Morehouse is Morehouse, guys. Like there's no need to bring in Ray Lewis to get more attention because let's really talk about it real quick. Okay. I see we've got 10 people in here. Let's really talk about it. The SIAC has a deal with ESPN. The only thing that ESPN has to do is put us on TV. They put the Benedict Savannah State game on TV. I believe that was week 2 or 3. That was the same day. If you guys watched in NFL, that was the same day that the Chiefs played the Chargers on Amazon Prime. So I was watching both simultaneously. And they put us on ESPN too. I gotta go back and pull the ratings numbers for that because I didn't go look at those ratings numbers, but they're probably not gonna be hard to find. I just find the date and then pull them, and I'll try to report back on that. But the SIAC has a deal with ESPN, and they just re-upped on it, and they had multiple games that were on ESPN Plus. You just got to upgrade them. And then you had the SIAC championship that was on ESPN3. We couldn't watch the game, so it was on ESPNU that Sunday morning, and they didn't do it for our convenience. They did it because that was already the plan, because it was already in the schedule, at least on YouTube TV. So all they got to do is put these games on TV. So if Morehouse, let's say if Morehouse got Ray Lewis, all they got to do is his first game, move from ESPN Plus to ESPNU. Voila. It's not like, Ray Lewis might have got them to bump it up, but we already have a deal in place with ESPN. And then maybe CNN and these other places would come around. Maybe, Shannon Sharp will talk about it, and Skip Bayless, they'll talk about it on Undisputed. Maybe First Take will talk about it. But this notion that, Deion Sanders is the only reason why the cameras are at Jackson State or in the SWAC, and Ray Lewis is going to bring ESPN. No, he's not. It's all about what the administrators for the SIAC and these conferences are doing, and they're cutting media deals. And to be honest, the media deals aren't all that great as far as with ESPN, but the accessibility is there, and that's why you get the media deals for. So I think that Coach Taggart would be better than Ray Lewis because you're getting a coach that can coach. That's how I look at it, But I mean, and someone said this, I want to scroll down to it. Someone said this, and I want to go to it. Owen Lawson said Willie Taggart got severance money too, so he could be a good fit. Exactly, especially if he wants to, really have an impact at an HBCU and really get back to his people. That would be great. I want to get to what Jethro Mullet said here. Winning games is the best recruiter and the best way to get everyone on board. And what I wanted to ask, but we were so deep into the conversation, then we switched over to Kentucky State and their coaching situation. I want to ask them is that, let's say that, Ray Lewis got hired at Morehouse, and let's say that they were able to weather the PR storm. They were able to soothe, the issues that Morehouse alums raised. They were able to get past all of it, and it's the start of the season, and we fast forward to mid-season, and let's say, they beat, a couple, of our schools in close games, of the schools in the SIAC, and they beat Tuskegee in the Classic, and they're like 3-1. And let's say they're losing out of conference game like West Florida. Are we having the conversation of Ray Lewis is a bad fit because what happened in Atlanta? Or it's going to be like, well, he's winning. That's a good question because Morehouse might be different from other schools. Maybe we would treat it differently. Like, do we still bring up the fact that he has a troubled history? Or do we bring up the fact that, like one of the commenters said, hey, he's rehabilitated himself. He's gotten better. He's on a different path. So let's let him change. I thought that was interesting, and I wanted to pose that to the room, but we couldn't because we were going real close to time. It's not Thanksgiving break anymore. So we gotta go on and go. And I do believe that winning games is the best recruiter, and I think that you want to get a Coach Taggart or you want to get an assistant. I think the model that the SIAC should be duplicating is you need to go get you a Coach Chennis Berry because you saw what he did at Benedict. You need to go get a young, up-and-coming, assistant coach or offensive coordinator, like someone that has the bona fides, that just needs the opportunity, like a Coach Gibbs or a Coach Berry, and give them the resources to lead. Give them 2 to 3 seasons. Don't get them out if they don't win the first season. Let them get a couple of recruiting cycles and then let them go. Because that's what Fort Valley did with Coach Gibbs. That's what Benedict did with Coach Berry. Because they did not do well that first season. Then they come back, second season, undefeated. You know, I mean, so you have to look at it like that. It's like you have to give these folks opportunities to grow, and you have to give them the resources to make that happen. So I think Fort Valley and Benedict really should be the blueprints right now. Not like, oh, well, Jackson State has Deion Sanders. No. Look in your conference and see the top 2 teams. Fort Valley, we finally beat Albany State after 5 years. You have Benedict that went undefeated and dominated their way to the championship, and they had the number 1 seed in Super Region 2. And by all accounts, I think all of us thought that Benedict would put up a fight and possibly could win. So look at that blueprint. Don't look at, oh, hey, like this is the blueprint of what Jackson State does, because that might not work for our conference. All right. So let's see. Is there any more comments? You know, for your first experience, thank you, Mr. Lawson. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. You know, and wait, Donnie Sowell said, I don't agree with you guys. Lewis has been doing great things, but it doesn't get recognized. They can bring up his past, but he's not the same person. When it all be forgiven? And possibly. But here's the thing. What happened with Ray Lewis, with someone passing away, was so egregious. And we saw even before HBCUs were mentioned, like it was said in the space, that when they went to the Super Bowl, that was brought up. And with HBCUs, let's be real, they do whatever to desecrate our image. Now, it is Morehouse, so it's not much you can do to go after Morehouse. Like, Morehouse is the school of Dr. Martin Luther King. And then if we do what we need to do on December the 6th, and also early voting is open, go vote. I'm voting tomorrow. And Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock gets back in. That is the alma mater of a United States senator currently. You know what I'm saying? You have so many other amazing men that went to Morehouse. Samuel L. Jackson went to Morehouse. Spike Lee went to Morehouse, right? So it would be hard to put crazy allegations like that and really desecrate the image of Morehouse because of how great the brand is and how historic the brand is and the amazing alumni and faculty members that have come from Morehouse. But it would be a story if you bring in Ray Lewis, and with HBCUs, and I think colleges in general, but HBCUs, we have to be very sensitive with our image. And, you know, Stephen brought up the fact that there wasn't a sports information director at Morehouse. We're so sensitive with our image. Do we want to put up with that? Even if it means a splashy hire and we can follow that Deion Sanders blueprint. I just don't know if it's worth it. I just don't know. But overall, just last comments. I know I extended it a little bit longer, but you all were commenting. I see you all, and I appreciate you. And it's still 6 people for what I'm seeing is still listening. But in conclusion, I think this is one of the best seasons in SIAC history. It was a lot of great storylines, and it was all on the field. It wasn't a lot of off-the-field drama. Benedict made history. I'm excited to see where they go from here. I'm excited about my HBCU. We should have handled business. We should have beaten Savannah State. I will say this again, and I said it in multiple broadcasts and on the space. Why did you go for it on 4th down instead of kicking the field goal? Because if you kick the field goal, you're down 28-24 going into that moment where the touchdown was called back. If you kick the field goal and you make the field goal, which you probably would have, it's a 90% chance you would have made it because like Fort Valley was doing pretty good kicking field goals. It would have been 28-27 going into that moment where Savannah State gets that touchdown and you're running a hurry up offense to get down the field. Instead of trying to go for a touchdown because you're down 28-24, you need a touchdown to win. Now you're going for a field goal because it's 28-27 in my scenario. You kick the field goal, you win 30-28, you're going to the playoffs because they're not going to doubt Fort Valley being 9-1. Then we finally beat Albany that was ranked. So that was on us. But I just feel it feels nasty to me. Honestly, it feels nasty to me grading the season on what you do in the playoffs. This isn't basketball. This isn't football. Well, it's football, but it's not the NFL and it's not the NBA. Let's say this is not basketball, it's not football. It is football, but it's not professional football. Like if the Falcons don't make the playoffs, I mean, I personally wouldn't be mad, but it's a sector of people that's like, hey, you could have made the playoffs. The division was weak. You know what I'm saying? Like if Tom Brady and the Buccaneers lose in the first round of the playoffs, now it's like, okay, what's going on? Tom Brady needs to retire. But if Fort Valley didn't make the playoffs, that's fine. Great season by Coach Gibbs. Benedict lost to Wingate. I wish it would have gone better, but that was a great season. And we're giving Coach Barry and Eric Phoenix and Benedict, we're giving them all of the flowers. So I think just in summation and in conclusion, great season. I wish we could have done these spaces a bit earlier because I think the conversations around what was going on, especially around that Benedict win, would have been interesting over Albany State. That would have been really interesting. That space would have been very interesting. But I can't wait to do this in the future. If Twitter doesn't crater, if it does, we're gonna find a way to do it here on HBCU Pulse. But it's a great season. I appreciate everyone for supporting. Continue to support our institutions, and I want to say big shout out to my people. I am a streaming partner for HBCU League Pass Plus. We had about, I would say, let me look because I keep saying the number. But I want to give a real number to the games that were on HBCU League Pass Plus for Benedict. I want to, give me 1 second. I want to, and we're live right now. So I want to go and let people know, like, y'all got to tap in with HBCU League Pass Plus. I'm a streaming partner. They streamed the game on Saturday, and it was a great stream. We got to support Black folks, you know what I'm saying? We got to support us because we know how to broadcast us. All right. So the Elizabeth City game was on HBCU League Pass Plus. You had the Kentucky State game that was on HBCU League Pass Plus. The Morehouse College and Albany State game was on HBCU League Pass Plus, as well as the Morehouse game and the Clark Atlanta game. And then you had the Wingate game was on HBCU League Pass Plus. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 of the 11 games that were streamed on HBCU League Pass Plus. So let's do this thought experiment really quickly, and then I'll be done. Imagine if HBCU League Pass Plus didn't exist. Mind you, ESPN has primary rights. So if they say, hey, we want the Albany State game, they could have gotten it. And League Pass can do anything about it because ESPN has the primary rights. So if they decide they want a game, we have no choice but to give it to them, right? But let's say HBC League Pass Plus did not exist. The Albany State game that was like the game of the year up to that point would not have been streamed. We wouldn't have that footage. It was a 24-20. It was 24-20 game. Albany State almost made a comeback. Wouldn't have seen it. You have that Clark Atlanta game where they went crazy. I think that was homecoming for them. 49-20. Got Morehouse College 35-0. Nothing. Wouldn't be seen. They beat Miles College, and it was a very great defensive game. Wouldn't have seen it. Because only the Savannah State game, the Fort Valley game, and the Allen game and the SIAC championship were on ESPN. Accessibility isn't just, ESPN can make us accessible. Black folks and Black services can make us accessible as well. And we have to add in the HBCU pulses and the HBCU game days to the conversation of accessibility and promotion, because we all have a part in promoting and growing, the footprint of HBCUs. It's not just ESPN. And that's what gets me. That's why I was so demonstrative about the thing of, Ray Lewis can bring ESPN when it's Morehouse. So CNN did a package on Morehouse before Deion Sanders came. They've covered Morehouse. BET was at Morehouse. They had the SGA president for their homecoming special during COVID before Deion Sanders got Jack. Well, no, it wasn't before Deion Sanders got Jack State. It was before he coached, because that was in October. Deion Sanders signed in September. And I'm saying Deion Sanders because they say, hey, Deion Sanders brought so much to HBCUs, and he did, but we weren't terrible. We weren't just in the dark before Deion Sanders came, and we wouldn't have been in the dark if Ray Lewis comes. But I just think we value these bigger platforms, and oftentimes those bigger platforms are not black owned. We value those platforms more because we believe that more people are going to see us if we're on ESPN. But if we're on ESPN Plus, you got to subscribe to get it. Meanwhile, HBC League Pass Plus had the Albany Benedict game, and it was free. And all you got to do is download the app. The accessibility might be even better on League Pass because I don't got to buy anything. What if I'm not really a football fan, but I'm hearing about Benedict and I want to see what's up? I want to buy ESPN Plus. I'm not that big of a football fan, but I want to see Benedict. Oh, I just got to download this app or watch it on my computer. Bet, boom, accessibility. Now, let me get off my soapbox. I talk about this all the time on HBCU Pulse Radio, but that is it. I appreciate you all for staying on. I see it's 5 people here. I appreciate you all for staying on and being a part of this space. It really means a lot because I love the SIAC and I want us to get our due. Make sure to follow HBCU Pulse here on YouTube and also on Instagram at HBCU Pulse. I'm forgetting everything I'm supposed to say. But follow us on Instagram and YouTube at HBCU Pulse. They have handles on YouTube now. So just type in HBCU Pulse and we'll come up. Follow us on Twitter and TikTok at VHBCU Pulse. Listen to HBCU Pulse Radio here on YouTube, but also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We have a big announcement coming up that I'm having a meeting for on this week, so make sure to stay tuned for that because it's going to be a seismic announcement, and I can't wait for that to finally, come into play because there's going to be a lot of great stuff we're going to be doing. And also make sure to subscribe to HBCU League Pass Plus. Not subscribe. I'm getting it all mixed up. I'm messing up. But make sure to download, not subscribe, because you don't got to subscribe. Download HBC League Pass Plus. It's free. You have a whole bunch of channels. You're able to watch all those Benedict College games that I talked about, including that Albany State game. But also, you don't got to subscribe. You can go watch the HBCU Pulse channel, channel 201. We have some great content. We have the Delaware State University homecoming concert, an official recap. So we got that going on, and we got Glorilla, we got Meek Mill, we got Moneybag Yo, we got Nardo Wick. We have some great conversations about, how to plan, an effective and lit HBCU homecoming. We have Sarah Lee, who's on our team. She does amazing content. She is great, and there's a lot of great things coming up for her. And, we have all Battle of the DJs content. We have a lot of great stuff coming. So thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm going to go on and get out here. Thank you so much. We're back. And as always, we'll see you on the other side.
What you hear? Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to HBCUPulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to